Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1112 of the War News stream. And today we have so much news, you're going to get sick of hearing the news. Today we have news that Moscow was attacked with a massive Ukrainian drone swarm. Also, U.S. officials resume all Ukraine military aid once more in a very big move. And also, Russia struck a cargo ship, a foreign flag cargo ship, with a missile today. So a lot of news to cover, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear in a shocking upset and reversal for the Russian Federation that the United States of America has just resumed, as of 5 hours ago, all intelligence sharing with the state of Ukraine and continuous military support. In short, unlimited soup and salad to the state of Ukraine as the war is continuing on at this point. We've been able to hear major developments not only in that regard, but in other regards from around the entirety of the world, as we were able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces have conducted the largest Ukrainian drone attack against the Russian Federation in the entirety of the war against the city of Moscow, with nearly 350 to 400 drones involved in the attack, raining down over the entire city of Moscow. Supposedly around 100 drones were shot down by the Russian Federation, but most drones, nearly 66%, made it to their targets. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear inside of the Middle East, specifically within Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, U.S. and Ukrainian delegation teams, or diplomatic delegations, met today and discussed the possibility of bringing peace into the conflict. And at this moment, the state of Ukraine has agreed with the United States that they will move forward to presenting the Russians with an option for a 30-day ceasefire to begin peace negotiations. Although we have not gotten a response from the Russian Federation yet, and there has been a decent amount of uproar and stirring going on inside the Russian Federation about the proposition of accepting a ceasefire agreement. At this point, it appears that it is unlikely that the Russian Federation will accept the ceasefire, and we've been able to hear that according to the Office of the President of the United States today, if the Russian Federation does not accept the ceasefire agreement and attempt to make it to the negotiating table, the United States, teamed up with Ukraine, will bring the Russian Federation to its knees, where they will be forced to negotiate on America's terms. We have also been able to hear major news from other areas around the world, as we have been able to hear that the state of North Korea, or the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, is stating that they are going to go to outright nuclear war over the U.S.-South Korean military exercises that are currently being conducted near to the demilitarized zone at this time. We have also been able to hear some larger news as well inside the United States, as the trade war has been continuing on in somewhat impressive fashion and between both the United States and Canada, and we've been able to see a lot of high drama in the diplomatic world over that today. But we have an insanely high amount of news, and this is really just covering the surface. Also, there is some news that some people may take as good or bad, but I'll make sure to include it right now. It appears that there is a rumor that's going around that the Ukrainian forces may be withdrawing from Kursk. There's also been some statements, at least I've seen in the chat, that may have happened just when we were going live, that the armed forces of Ukraine may have officially announced a withdrawal from the Kursk Oblast. We're not entirely sure on that. We have been able to see that the Russian Federation did take Malaya Luchnia today, showing that they are advancing within the northern direction, which only about a month ago, the Ukrainians were actually conducting a counterattack and advancing within that direction, and some people have begun to assume that the Ukrainian armed forces may have decided to conduct a withdrawal from the Kursk Oblast and give up on the diversionary attempt that had been going on in that area for around 6 to 7 months at this point. We're not entirely sure, but we will be trying to figure out more information on that as the stream goes on, if there's any developments, or we'll most likely be able to give y'all a major update on that tomorrow. But moving on from all of that and everything else, we have to get y'all into the news. I mean, the news is quite literally insane today in every single metric. And moving us on into the biggest piece of news that we have today, we were able to see that the largest drone attack of the entire war that's ever been conducted by Ukraine was a success against the capital of Moscow just overnight. Around 16 hours ago at this point, 350 to 400 Ukrainian drones, the number hasn't even been ascertained yet due to the scale of the air attack, flew all the way across the Russian Federation, striking targets at Oriel and a couple of others along the way to Moscow, and then rained hell onto the city of Moscow itself. We were able to see that some drones had already started to hit some of the targets along the way as the massive swarm made its way to Moscow, as we were able to see here a bright orange glow across the horizon near to the city of Oriel, where the Oriel refinery had been hit and was burning at that time. We then were able to hear that about an hour after that, or an hour and a half after that, the first signs of contact were being made in the skies of Moscow, as Ukrainian drones were now rapidly making their way into the airspace and were beginning to quite truly wreak havoc across the entirety of the city. We were able to see that out of all 350 drones, only about 100 of them were shot down, according to what the Russian Federation's air defense was able to report, meaning that even according to the Russians' own air defense command, only about 30% or 33% of all drones that were launched in the attack were shot down by the Russian Federation. It appears that most of them were able to hit their target, and the Russian Federation has an interception rate at this point of around 33%, which is abysmally low compared to the Ukrainians' normal interception rates of Russian drones attacking Ukraine, which is near to 80 to 90% in the current time zone of this war. But we were able to see the multiple impact sites around the city of Moscow. We have not been able to ascertain exact geolocated footage for each one of these impact sites, but we have been able to see that there were a large amount of attacks right outside of the middle ring road of Moscow. Moscow is made up of multiple ring roads, as they are called, which are major highway systems constructed in larger and larger circles from the center of Moscow that provide a major transportation corridor around the city. You can actually largely categorize Moscow itself within these ring roads. The very dead center first perimeter ring road is largely the governmental center. You can usually find that that most Russian governmental buildings are just outside of the inner ring road, or they're all inherently located dead center within the ring roads. The Kremlin is literally dead center of Moscow. It's pretty much the geographical center. Then in the outer ring road, the second ring road right here, you can usually find the larger financial centers and most other high-end areas of Moscow within the second ring road, which is right here, including Moscow City, which is famously pictured and usually used in propaganda shoots by the Russians to make it look like Moscow is an incredibly advanced society with pretty high-end technology, not only that, buildings. But outside of that, the third and fourth ring roads are where things are a lot less nice. The third ring road perimeter, which is where most of these attacks appear to have occurred, along with the fourth ring road, are really the industrial areas of the city of Moscow, and also where most citizens of Moscow that are not the elite of the Russian Federation tend to live. These areas are the ones that actually have strategically viable targets. Usually military bases and airfields are found within the third and fourth ring roads, but most importantly, another thing that's incredibly interesting is that there is also a great deal of fuel storage within the third and fourth ring roads. The fifth ring road, which is the E115, which circles all the way around Moscow, was built back in the day for future developments of Moscow in its process of urbanization. It was planned that eventually there would be a fifth ring road that would be needed, but in the modern day, it really doesn't serve a purpose, and the area in between the fourth and fifth ring roads is largely agricultural land with some larger settlements within it, but not as large as a population area or an industrial area as the third and fourth ring road perimeters are. But nevertheless, most of the attacks did strike within that fourth and third ring road perimeter, and especially onto the southern end, near to the towns of Lyubertsy, Vidnoye, Kommunarka, which is when a communist becomes a narc, Domodedovo, Podolsk, and many other towns such as these. We also were able to hear that there were some possible hits near to the Zhukovsky International Airport, although once again, we have not gotten exact picture and video evidence to be able to confirm the impacts near to that international airport. But we do have a very voluminous and wide amount of video and picture evidence that came from the entirety of these attacks, showing the Russians shooting down some of the drones, confirming that they actually did manage to intercept some of them, but a decent amount of them actually did also end up impacting the city as well and causing a significant amount of damage. Interestingly enough, not to many military targets, but it appears that some of the drones may have gone errant or may have been hitting residential buildings or some other office complex. But we were able to see right here one of the drones earlier on the day. This was one of the last clips that we got making the news today, coming into Moscow in broad daylight. And we can see it right here.
Look at that. No air defense at all. Where's the air defense at?
Oh, it's going to be coming. I can promise you that on this one. But interestingly enough, the Ukrainian drone does look a bit like a Shahed, but the air defense is right here.
Oh, look at that. How did it get that far close to Moscow, though, with the air defense just hitting it literally right before it got to the target? That's kind of crazy.
Well, interestingly enough, from what we understand, the Russian Federation actually doesn't have a lot of air defense systems like we've seen over really years at this point in the conflict. The Russian Federation has lost a significant amount of their larger caliber air defense systems or surface-to-air missile batteries inside of Ukraine, and we've also been able to see that they've lost a decent amount of their medium-range air defense systems as well, like the Buks or the Tors inside of Ukraine. This means that largely the Russian Federation is largely relegated on the wide scale, even in Moscow, to short-range air defense systems. The most common one that we've seen so far that's been deployed around the Moscow perimeter is the Pantsir missile system, which is almost the modification in its own right of the older Tunguska tracked self-propelled anti-aircraft gun system. But the Pantsir is a trunk-based version that is able to use shorter-range surface-to-air missiles and also has a quad mounted, I believe it's a 30mm autocannon system that can also engage targets at an incredibly close range, although we have not seen that ever used in the Moscow city perimeter, most likely due to the fear of collateral, where, you know, you could spray, say, a couple of hundred rounds of the drone, and if they don't proxy fuse near to the drone and they just continue to fly, they could proxy fuse just a couple of feet above, say, a residential zone and end up causing civilian casualties. So we largely see that the Pantsirs only use their missile systems within the city, but this is really the only air defense that we've seen. Beyond that, air defense does not exist outside of the Moscow city perimeter, and it appears to be completely void in most areas of the Russian Federation, especially on the long march, but the long march that's made by Ukrainian drones from the Ukrainian border and into the area of Moscow. It appears that there really isn't any air defense that was present there at all, and of course, if there is any air defense, it is most likely small arms fire by AKMs or a PKP Pechnik, because it appears that that's all the Russians really have to spare within most areas of the country. And that also means, to get back in a full circle to answer Matthew's question, when the drones make it across the country, these Pantsir systems at their longest range have about a 10-mile interception range, meaning that these targets, or these drones, have to be within 10 miles of that specific Pantsir system to be engaged and shot down by the surface-to-air missiles that it's carrying, meaning that the air defense perimeter around Moscow is wildly small. Crazily enough, it's almost the same perimeter size that the Soviet Union had during World War II around the city of Moscow during the Battle of Moscow. So a little bit wild when you think about that about 80 years have passed at this point since the end of World War II, and the air defense perimeter around Moscow is about as competent as the air defense perimeter around Moscow during World War II, at least in terms of range, and also really in terms of the interception rate as well. But we were also able to see that the drones were starting to cause hell throughout a good amount of the city, as impacts were being seen quite literally everywhere.
Looks like air defense didn't quite get that one right there. Looks like they made it through.
It looks like this little car lot's cooking.
Luckily, they all have insurance, right?
What do you mean insurance? What
does this mean? Do you have the Oxford out that we can see?
I don't know what an insurance is. We hear the slide whistle in the background, classic Russia.
Oh, you know when the horn's constant, it's going down.
Dude, when the horn's constant, a car just flatlined out there. Like, it goes beep, yeah. Beep, beep. It's like, oh, that car just died. It's like, unfortunate. Oh, we hear some air defense firing in the background there.
Man, some would say the sales are hot, the sales are plenty.
Honestly, this sounds like an average McDonald's, like with all the noises in the kitchen, like the kind of thing. But also, oh crap, I forgot to show the rest of those clips that we had right there, because there are a lot of them that came out of Moscow. Here is another clip. You can hear the drone. And you can see, I'm not really sure if that one got intercepted by air defense or if it hit something. It was really hard to see. Let's see if we can watch it again. I can't actually tell. I could never see the drone in the whole clip. We just saw an explosion, and that was it. But moving on from that and on into the next clip, we also got to see this drone exploding on what appears to be the top of a high-rise in the middle of Moscow.
Some would say this out of a rooftop fire pit. I mean, I have a pool, but they got a fire.
You're going to get so tired of fire. It's like, there's going to be so much fire. But moving on from that, we also got to see the aftermath of that parking lot that we saw earlier that was a roaring inferno. And this is what it looked like after the sun started to rise. Most cars within the parking lot were incinerated. That's the end of those clips, but we still have a load more to cover inside of Moscow. We were able to see additional clips as well, once again showing attacks from different angles. We were able to see this Ukrainian drone, a different design than the one we saw prior, and it doesn't really look like a Liudi long-range drone either, so we actually do not know at this point what particular drone this was, or at least design. We see it flying right over. And that was the end of that clip. Very short, very sweet, but to the point. We also got to see this picture here showing a little bit of damage to one of the high-rises from one of the impacts that the drone made. It appears that the hit was pretty decent in terms of damage, but we do not know why that drone hit that particular building. May have run errant, or it may have been a deliberate hit. We can also see a residential building cooking here.
It seems like a little bit of everything got hit today. Ukraine was just smashing whatever was closest.
Man, they said, the Ukrainians said, what kind of a drone attack will it be? And Cersky said, call the charcuterie board because we're going to get a little bit of everything. It's like, man, that's like, I don't know. It's like, it's a little wild. But we can also see a still picture from the parking lot fire that we saw earlier. We also get to see, believe it or not, folks, more footage of the attacks. This one's actually a pretty interesting one because that thing out there that kind of looks like a tower with the red lights on top of it, that's actually one of those pantsier air defense towers where they put a pantsier on top of it with a crane. That's actually what that is. So that's actually a view of one of the air defense towers in Moscow at work. So here it is. And we see it fire a missile. We can now hear it a little bit. And we don't hear an impact. Moving on from that and into our next clip. That appears to be a repeat of the last one, just with a wider lens. So moving on from that. We can also see a drone flying in here. Blowing up somewhere, although I couldn't tell where.
That guy closed the window like that was going to repel it if it came his way. It's like, dude, that glass is not stopping that drone.
Dude, this fella's thinking it's like a hailstorm. He's like, if I just close the window, it'll be fine. It's like, nah, I'm doubting that one. It was such a gentle close. He's just like, I don't want any of that. Closes the window. Unfortunately, we do not know what that actually hit, but once again, it appears to be somewhere within southern Moscow, within the 3rd Ring Road perimeter. We also got to see in another clip that there were some oil tanks that were damaged somewhere around the area of Moscow, which we can see right here. We can see them spraying water on it, as one naturally does. And MASH. But that's the end of the clip right there. And it does appear, once again, to round everything out, that the drone attack largely was a success from what we're understanding. We were able to hear that there were a decent amount of targets hit within Moscow. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to see a lot of videos that came out at the break of dawn really showing us the true extent of the damage. There was a very limited number, and we'll most likely be getting a good amount of those over the course of today and tomorrow. But still, it does appear that this attack was a very significant one. And we've also been able to hear that a lot of people have been weighing in on what this attack really was supposed to be, or what it was supposed to mean. This attack, once again, to put this out there, is not one of the largest of the war. This was the largest of the war on the side of Ukraine. The Ukrainian armed forces have only launched drone attacks of significant scale like this in very rare instances over the course of the conflict. The largest one that we ever saw, which happened in the earlier part of 2024, consisted of around 140 to 170 Ukrainian drones being fired into the Russian Federation. That means that this current attack today was nearly twice the size of the largest attack that has ever been conducted by Ukraine in the history of the war. It is a huge attack. This is actually one, quite truly, for the history books. To remind everyone of something else, the attack that the Islamic Republic of Iran conducted against Israel in April of last year was also considered to be incredibly large and had around, I believe it was 500 drones involved in the attack against the state of Israel, and that was considered to be one of the largest drone swarm attacks that had ever been seen in history so far. And the Ukrainians were only about 100 short of that today on Moscow. It is a wild thing to see, and a lot of people are wondering what kind of a message was this supposed to send, if it was supposed to send any at all. And it appears that many people are believing that the Ukrainians wanted to send a warning to the Russians to make sure to remind them that they largely are being a little bit benevolent in striking targets in a major way throughout the entirety of the Russian Federation. Some others are saying that the attack was already scheduled, and this was just going out according to plan. Others are saying that Ukraine wants to derail the peace talks, although that wouldn't really make a lot of sense because they already agreed to moving the peace talks forward today, so that'd be a little bit odd. And some others are unsure and undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So it looks like 53% of the audience said Ukraine wanted to send a warning to the Russians by launching this massive drone attack, while 31% said the attack was probably already scheduled, and 11% said Ukraine wanted to derail the peace talks. And I would say, based on the sounds of it, it sounds like this attack was already in motion when they had actually launched it. The objective was not to try to derail the peace talks, even though it did happen before they agreed to the ceasefire. I don't think that was the objective. I think the objective was to simply carry out a predestined attack that they already had planned on Moscow. And once again, it was the largest attack of the war. So it took a lot of planning and also a lot of preparations, and they really just couldn't call it off since they had it scheduled. So I don't think there was any real message behind it. It was probably just an attack they had ready to go, and they simply carried it out. And the timing was a little bit unfortunate because, of course, the peace talks did take place right after that with the U.S., but they did not intend to derail anything. So I'm with the 31%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I believe I would be with the 31% as well. It appears that the attack was most likely already scheduled because war planning doesn't really work around diplomatic negotiations. Usually these things are planned well out in advance, especially involving such a large number of drones as this. It had to be a well-coordinated and planned out attack that was being planned most likely over weeks or months within specific circles. I would say, though, that it probably was maybe a warning to the Russians, because Zelenskyy at the end could have gone, "I am not here to play cards, I'm here to play craps, and the Russians are going to be crapping their pants. I will win." So I don't know. Maybe it was that as well. I'm doubting that a little bit. But nevertheless, it seems as though it was most likely a pre-planned attack based off of just the size, the scale, and the complexity of it. This most likely took an incredibly long amount of planning, and so it was to be executed during a time of fair weather at a time of convenience, which most likely was just today. This actually happened, by the way, about 8 hours before the diplomatic conference in Saudi Arabia, I believe, even began. So it was a significant amount of time before anything was even going on in between the United States and Ukraine inside of Saudi Arabia. And speaking of that, there is something big that we do have to talk about that came out of Saudi Arabia today. Many people do know that Saudi Arabia is known for a great many deal of things. One of them is the line, but we're not here to talk about that. We are here to talk about what happened in Riyadh. And let me go see. There we go. There is Riyadh. Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, built in perfect grids, which is actually kind of wild to see. But Riyadh is a very interesting place, largely rising out of the sand, really just from the 1950s to the present day. It is a city of modernity, built to modern standards. Sometimes, though, some people do question things like, why in the world are they growing palm trees and nice luscious grass in the middle of one of the most arid deserts in the world? But we don't ask those kinds of questions around here. What we are trying to ask about is what came out of the U.S.-Ukrainian conference that was held inside of Riyadh today, and it appears that there was a pretty good amount of things that did happen. We were able to see that there was a small clip that was made during a recess that was held in between the American and Ukrainian diplomats, and we were able to see here that some people were following around the U.S. delegation as it appeared they were going on break, most likely to have lunch, and asked Mike Waltz, who's one of the security advisors, national security advisors to the President of the United States, how it was going, and he said it looks like they were getting somewhere. So here's the clip with him saying that in it.
Secretary Rubio, how was the meeting?
Sir, how was the meeting?
Did it go well, Mr. Waltz?
Get there.
And as you hear, they said they were getting there. So it appeared that there was some kind of progress being made. At that point in time, when the video was made earlier today, that was all we had at the moment. And about 30 minutes to an hour after the video was published, we then got a whole load of additional information about what actually came out of the Saudi Arabian, Ukrainian-American diplomatic conference that was held inside of the country. And we were able to get a lot. And it actually turned out to be incredibly good, at least according to the information that we have right now. This is the U.S.-Ukraine statement after the talks in Saudi Arabia in full for the large part, and I'll also be adding on a lot of additional details that we were able to get out of the diplomatic conference today. Today in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, under the gracious hospitality of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the United States and Ukraine took important steps towards restoring durable peace for Ukraine. Representatives of both nations praised the bravery of the Ukrainian people in defense of their nation and agreed that now is the time to begin a process towards lasting peace. The Ukrainian delegation reiterated the Ukrainian people's strong gratitude to the President of the United States, the U.S. Congress, and the people of the United States for making possible meaningful progress towards peace. Ukraine expressed readiness to accept U.S. proposals to enact an immediate interim 30-day ceasefire, which appears to be an all-inclusive ceasefire, meaning that this would be a ground, air, and sea ceasefire, which can be extended by mutual agreement of the parties, and which is subjected to acceptance and concurrent implementation by the Russian Federation. Meaning, in short, just to stop right here and explain this, This is a ceasefire that is not in place, and that's something that a lot of people have misunderstood. America and Ukraine today decided on the ceasefire they are going to present the Russians with the option of accepting. Right now, the Russian Federation has accepted nothing. So at this moment, the ceasefire is not in effect, and the war is still going on right now. The United States will communicate to Russia that Russian reciprocity is the key to accepting peace or achieving peace. The United States will immediately lift the pause on intelligence sharing and resume security assistance to Ukraine. At this point, we have been able to hear and have confirmed that there has been a massive amount of U.S. support that has now been trucked and railroaded into the state of Ukraine from Rzeszów, Poland at this moment, and we now do see clear evidence that military support and information sharing has once again continued. The delegations also discussed the importance of humanitarian relief efforts as part of the peace process, particularly during the above-mentioned ceasefire, including the exchange of prisoners of war, the release of civilian detainees, and the return of forcefully transferred Ukrainian children. Both delegations agreed to name their negotiation teams and immediately begin negotiations toward an enduring peace that provides for Ukraine's long-term security. The United States committed to discussing these specific proposals with representatives from Russia. The Ukrainian delegation reiterated that European partners shall be involved in the peace process. Lastly, both countries' presidents agreed to conclude as soon as possible a comprehensive agreement for developing Ukraine's critical mineral resources to expand Ukraine's economy, offset the cost of American assistance, and guarantee Ukraine's long-term prosperity and security. In short,
You know what's funky about this right here is it seems like we're back to square one, which is honestly a good thing because once again, all we wanted was aid to restart back to Ukraine again because Ukraine has to have that military aid to keep fighting the war. But the catch was the holdup was the mineral deal. That was what was holding up the entire situation was that Ukraine and the U.S. couldn't agree on what the terms were going to be for that mineral deal. So now that they've restarted the military aid without a mineral deal, it's like what has really changed? Because Ukraine never outright rejected a ceasefire, I don't think. They said they would talk about it. They maybe do a partial ceasefire, but they were willing to discuss it. So the only thing that's really changed here is the U.S. has caved in a little bit. But other than that, Zelenskyy really hasn't changed the position hardly at all, really.
It really has not changed much. And there is a very interesting deal here with what's going to be going on because of this. Most importantly, there's been a lot of misunderstandings that I've seen today going around that people have not been getting is that there is no ceasefire in effect right now. The United States and Ukraine got together on what they're going to ask the Russians about, really, as far as a ceasefire. So right now, the United States and Ukraine are on the same page that they're going to ask the Russians if they would accept a 30-day ceasefire, an all-inclusive ceasefire. Right now, we are understanding that the Russian Federation has given no response to a ceasefire request yet, and also there's been no official statements made to the Russian Federation so far about the actual ceasefire agreement, meaning that this hasn't been presented to the Russians yet for them to accept or deny it. However, there is a lot of discussion going on right now as to whether the Russians would even accept a ceasefire at this moment. The Russian Federation is at the moment, in their minds, most likely viewing it as a win in the conflict. And I once again want to lay out there that the Russian Federation has always not been accepting of a peace idea throughout the war. I've been around to see it. They've always come up with the idea that they love life and they would like for people to stop dying. And then when the Ukrainians ask, okay, well, how do we bring the war to the end? The Russians say, we want y'all to all give up and surrender and we'll take over your country, but there will finally be peace, meaning that the Russians are looking for unconditional surrender, and that's what they're calling some sort of a manageable or agreeable peace. We all know that that's not an agreeable peace, and that's not anything that would actually work at all for anyone. So we will most likely see that there will be a pretty heated discussion in Moscow, or more so a very contentious decision that will be made by Putin as to whether or not they actually will agree to any kind of a ceasefire. That is something that a lot of people are thinking might not actually happen, myself included. There is a decent likelihood that the Russian Federation may accept a ceasefire, but considering that they are making frontline progress in the Kursk Oblast at this point, and there's a pretty decent chance that the Ukrainians may have completely withdrawn or retreated retreated from the Kursk Oblast at this point, the Russian Federation may take that as a sign that they may be able to achieve larger strategic victories inside the front lines of Ukraine, and for that reason, they may say that they would accept the ceasefire, but under completely abstentious terms, meaning that we would have to meet some ludicrously crazy terms to actually see the ceasefire implemented. We've already heard from one Russian deputy minister that he stated that most sanctions would have to be lifted against the Russian Federation for them to accept the ceasefire, meaning that they pretty much want to reap the diplomatic rewards of ending the war without actually ending the war and just moving into the diplomatic process in itself, something that the United States may not be willing to accept at this point. This will start to release a good deal of leverage, and then the Russians may start to act in bad faith during the diplomatic negotiating process. There are also a larger amount of factors to weigh in as well, that the Russian Federation, once again, does not view the United States or Ukraine favorably and does view both countries as hostile to Russian interest and the Russian sphere of influence. For this reason, we may also see once again that there is largely a breaking point there where they do not want to enter a negotiating process in good faith to actually see that there may be some kind of a compromise and may still be insisting on some sort of a total victory that simply would not be achievable for the Russian Federation in any circumstance in the conflict. But loads of people have weighed in their opinions on what will actually be happening or why the Russians, well, what the Russians will do in response to this ceasefire offer. And it appears that many people are saying that the Russians are most likely going to flat out refuse the ceasefire deal. So Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so about 66% of the audience, an overwhelming majority, said no, Russia will refuse the ceasefire deal and they will not accept it, while 11% said yes, Russia will agree on the deal, and 18% said it's really a 50-50 chance. And I will admit, this is putting Russia in a very interesting position because it's putting the ball back in Putin's court. And so far, the ball has been basically in Ukraine's court the entire time. And Ukraine's been on the defensive when basically dealing with the United States. That's been the big holdup right now, is how the U.S. is treating Ukraine. So now Putin has to make a decision because right now Russia feels like they're taking ground inside of Kursk. So in their minds, they feel like they have momentum. So a ceasefire at this point may not be favorable for Russian generals because they feel like they're pushing the Ukrainians back. But also, on the other hand, if they don't accept the ceasefire, then they make the U.S. president look like a fool because the U.S. president said Russia wants peace, they're easier to deal with than Ukraine, and Ukraine's the problem. Well, if Russia decides to reject the ceasefire, which is, of course, has the blessing of the president of the United States, then they're going to make him look like a fool, and then Russia's going to prove themselves to be the true enemy. So either way they go, it's not really favorable to Russia, and it's putting them in a tricky situation. And once again, we have not heard a peep from the Russian officials about the ceasefire plan, not a good word or a bad word. So right now, I'm not really sure which way it's going to go. I'm kind of leaning toward the side that they'll probably reject it or they'll put crazy terms on it that probably makes it not viable. But nonetheless, Ukraine has military aid once again. So whatever the case is, Ukraine is being armed. And so far, it's not contingent on a mineral deal. So whatever the case is, Ukraine will be fine regardless of what the outcome is. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, in my opinion, I believe that there's a more so decent chance that the Russian Federation is not going to accept the ceasefire. From what I've seen in the past, and we've been here every day, I know that many of you all know that, there has really never been a time where the Russians have truly acted in good faith on trying to end the war. They have always insisted and pushed for a total victory as the only way to bring about any kind of ceasefire or an end to the active fighting, which means that they're probably still going to be looking for total victory at this point. We do have to remember that Putin is considering, at least on a strategic level, that the state of Ukraine, if it continues to survive at all, is going to pose a massive risk and a threat to the Russian Federation in the future. If Ukraine even remains as a neutral country, they are pretty much put in the exact same position as Finland or Sweden was, and with the fact that the United States is already eyeballing major financial investments by American investment firms like BlackRock into Ukrainian mineral extraction, this makes it incredibly clear that in a post-war world, the Ukrainians are going to be economically aligned to the United States, and therefore, by extension, a Western sphere of some variety, or really a blend of two spheres. It may be a separate European sphere and American sphere simultaneously, and this means that while they are technically neutral, due to all of their connections and ties to external countries, they're going to be viewed as pro-Western. Now, this is something that's a little bit important important to discuss, because even if Ukraine ended up technically coming out of the conflict as a neutral country in the advent of a ceasefire, there are a lot of other countries that went down that path, and their courses of action were very clear even as a neutral country. For example, Sweden and Finland throughout the entirety of the Cold War were neutrally aligned countries, meaning that they were not a part of the Warsaw Pact and they were also not a part of NATO. But at the same time, it was very well understood by everyone at the time that if a major conflict broke out in Europe, Sweden and Finland were going to largely join NATO's side and fight against the Soviet Union because they considered them to be a larger threat to their sovereignty and security than NATO. That's largely the exact same thing that would have happened to Ukraine. Ukraine would have a decent amount of economic connections to the West. They would largely find the West a lot more palatable of a partner and a friend. And not only that, due to the horrific atrocities that have been conducted by the Russian Federation throughout the conflict, the Ukrainian public, which will continue, of course, to vote in democratic elections well into the future, will largely have very unfriendly views or opinions of the Russians, much like the Chinese have against the Japanese for the atrocities committed in World War II, and much like the South and North Koreans have for the atrocities that Japan committed in World War II. Kind of like how Taiwan also doesn't like the Japanese for the atrocities they committed in World War II. Generally, everyone doesn't like Japan for the atrocities they committed in World War II, but that's beyond the point. That largely is the same kind of a mindset that the Ukrainians would have against the Russian Federation, and they're going to continue to vote in presidents that are going to be more so Western leaning than Russian leaning. And this means, as far as the Russians are concerned, even if Ukraine did end up becoming neutral, they're still going to be Western aligned anyways. So the Russians are not able to see an absolute victory in Ukraine and practically install the leader that they want inside the state of Ukraine, they may as well view Ukraine as being Western aligned, whether they're technically neutral or not. So with that in mind, the Russian Federation is most likely not going to accept the ceasefire arrangement under this current condition, because it still largely means that Ukraine controls 80% of its pre-1991, well, its post-1991 borders, and not only that, it is going to most likely end up becoming Western aligned anyways. So they probably will not accept a ceasefire for that reason, and they will probably insist on meeting more stringent terms, or pretty much making Ukraine accept certain kinds of conditions by the Russians before a ceasefire even comes into place, meaning that the ceasefire attempt is most likely going to fall apart before it even happens. There is a less likely option, and of course, while I'm fairly certain that they probably will not accept a ceasefire agreement, there is the less likely option that they might. The Russians might accept a ceasefire agreement, although it does appear that they're making ground in the Kursk Oblast right now, simply for the fact that they will try and paint the picture on a diplomatic level that they truly are amenable to some sort of a concept of peace. While that may be the case, they may attempt during the time of the ceasefire to get involved in diplomatic negotiations and once again insist entirely on unconditional terms that will be unacceptable to Ukraine and the United States. It has become a little bit clear through the processes that we've heard today that the United States is fairly clear that the state of Ukraine will continue to exist after the war. And it also appears that the state of Ukraine may have the possibility of getting back some of their lands within the southern regions of the country, things that we already know the Russian Federation would not accept. The United States is willing to push those things forward for Ukraine, viewing them as amicable and fair, but the Russian Federation will not accept that, even if the Ukrainians and the United States are pursuing that. So largely from what
Also, another thing as well, Enforcer, even if Russia accepted the ceasefire, Russia has a history of breaking ceasefires. Like, they've never really honored them. If they have, it's been very far and few in between. So if they were to agree to it, what are the odds that Russia simply stages a false flag event to essentially break the ceasefire early so they can get right back to attacking and then claim that Ukraine was the one that broke the ceasefire? Because honestly, like, obviously we don't trust Russia to uphold a ceasefire. That's a pretty obvious thing. They lie like crazy. So even if they were to accept it, there would probably be some tricks or something going on. And anyway, even if they completed the entire 30-day ceasefire and didn't even do a false flag attack, what are the odds that they can negotiate a peace during that 30 days? Or what are the odds it simply starts right back up after that month goes by?
I have a feeling that a ceasefire might not be able to be arranged within a single month. They might be able to extend it, or they might agree to extend the ceasefire, but I'm having a feeling that there is no actual peace treaty that could come out in a month. Because if you look at the Treaty of Versailles, and let me go and show this to all of y'all, because this is something a little bit important to point out. The Treaty of Versailles was signed in June 28th of 1919. The First World War, or the Great War as some people call it, ended on November 11th of 1918, meaning that there was almost an entire 8 months of negotiating that went on in between the German Empire, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire had practically ceased to exist at that point, so it was really just the German Empire with the Allies. And that means, in a big roundabout kind of a sense, that if we were to go off of a similar kind of a negotiating time frame, that it would take maybe 8 months for the Russians and the Ukrainians to hammer out everything and actually agree to some sort of a peace treaty, meaning that we could see that this 1 month ceasefire is largely just a brief break from the conflict, and the conflict begins again after this month is over. We could see that the Russians come into the negotiations with absolutely absurd claims or ideas about what they are looking for, and once again, largely insisting on unconditional terms that neither the United States nor Ukraine would be willing to accept, and once again, if that happens, the 1 month ceasefire lapses and the conflict begins again. And if the Russians
and then that brings up another question as well. If the 30-day ceasefire is adhered to, let's say both sides agree to it, they go through the 30 days without a problem, that nobody fires a shot, it stays the way it is. Which side stands to benefit the most from that 30-day break? Because someone's going to benefit from it. I personally have no hope in hell that there's actually going to be a peace deal done within 30 days. I don't think that's going to happen. Russia's already made it clear they are not agreeable to any fair terms, and they're wanting to have it completely lopsided toward their version and basically screw Ukraine over. So no peace deal is going to be had. So even if they had the 30-day ceasefire, is it going to give Russia the advantage of rebuilding their armaments and equipment and also training some more troops to go at it again after the 30 days is over? Or is it going to be beneficial to Ukraine even more?
I think it might. I think a ceasefire is not going to be unilaterally beneficial to just the Russians. It's most likely going to be beneficial in terms of building up supplies and equipment for both sides. Because we do have to remember that during a 1 month ceasefire, especially since U.S. military support has resumed, we could see that the Europeans and the United States rapidly stockpile Ukraine with enough artillery shells and largely munitions that once a ceasefire ends, because the Russians may attempt to go into it in bad faith and come out of it in a month, that the Ukrainians may actually have enough firepower that at least for those first 2 opening months at the end of a ceasefire, they're able to match the Russians shot for shot on the front line, or get incredibly close to doing so. Meaning that really, as far as that is concerned, the Ukrainians would have the advantage, because right now they're able to hold their ground even with the Russians out shooting them nearly 3-1 on a daily basis. If they're able to get up to shooting nearly 2-1 against the Russians, or 1-1 against the Russians, that means that the Ukrainians not only are able to largely suppress the Russian guns, but they're also able to use their qualitative advantages to be able to make sure to overpower the Russians on the battlefield, meaning that the Ukrainians and the Russians could come out of the ceasefire actually better for wear, and it may actually see that the war goes on longer, or maybe even shorter, especially if the Ukrainians are able to stockpile and plan up enough things during that ceasefire, so that way, if it did go badly, they come out of the ceasefire swinging immediately and continue to hit major Russian critical infrastructure, and also start to target and destroy Russian forces on the field to a degree that's never been seen before. So there's a lot of ways that this could go, but I don't think a ceasefire would be entirely detrimental to Ukraine or to Russia. I think we may see that this would allow both sides to stock up enough that if the ceasefire did end, they are almost at square one that they're at right now. It's just that they're a little bit better equipped and armed by the end of it equally.
Yeah, honestly, I just don't see Russia taking it. Like, I'm not saying it's impossible, and I'm still a little bit on the fence about it, but I just don't see Russia taking it, because I feel like Russia has in their heads right now, since they've taken a bit of land back in Kursk once again, they feel like they've got the upper advantage. And also, they're all convinced that somehow they're winning on the front lines, even though they're not. They're not taking much ground at all on the front lines. But the Kursk win is going to be a huge propaganda win for the Russians, and I think because of that, they will feel amped up and probably not willing to pause anything for right now. They'll probably be wanting to push on forward, which means they're probably going to counteroffer something really stupid. That's my assumption and guess, but we'll have to see how it turns out, because I think we're going to be hearing something probably tomorrow morning about this. Peskov, who's the very loudmouth spokesperson in Russia, he'll probably be out there twitching and saying something tomorrow. So I'll be curious to see what the inclination is on the Russian side.
Also, I just saw someone, Paul Campbell, say that is an air and sea ceasefire. That is not the
No.
statement that was made today. This is an all-inclusive 30-day ceasefire. I'll read the text for you again. Ukraine expressed readiness to accept the U.S. proposal to enact an immediate interim 30-day ceasefire. There is no stipulations that means it's only air and sea. This is an all-inclusive ceasefire, contrary to the one that we heard suggested by Zelenskyy over the days leading up to the Saudi Arabian conference. This is not an air and sea ceasefire. This is an all-inclusive ceasefire, meaning that the fighting actually will stop in the air, sea, and land all simultaneously once the ceasefire goes into effect, if it ever does. So that is a bit of a correction that we have to make there, because I know that a lot of people are thinking that, because that's what we've been hearing leading up to this from Zelenskyy and also Macron, as well as Starmer in the UK, but that isn't exactly the case in the actual wordage that was put out today by the actual conference that happened in Riyadh. So I just want to make sure there that we actually have the receipts to back that up, because I understand why you would think that and say that, but that's not exactly what came out of the conference today. But still, there is something else that is coming out of the news today that is a little bit interesting, because once again, we do have to remind everyone that while this was happening in Saudi Arabia, just 8 hours before, the Ukrainians conducted the largest drone attack in the Russian Federation in history, and it appears that the Russians did not take that too well, and it appears that they took it very badly, as a matter of fact, and it looks like they consider this to be a major threat to Russia as far as what the attack's implications are. We were able to hear that later on in the day, the State Duma Defense Committee head Karpatalov urged Putin to respond to the drone attacks, and in a specific quote, he stated that the decision is up to the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, but I think it would be useful to launch an Oreshnik, preferably more than one. And we can see this from this guy right here who has the face of a rat that eats cheese. But beyond that, a lot of people have been talking about this statement as well, because this is something that, before we even get into the poll, is showing a great deal of weakness from the Russian Federation, just to put it a little bit mildly. This is a drone attack of a scale that we've seen the Russians conduct against Ukraine several times before. While this is the largest drone attack that Ukraine has conducted against Russia in the war, the Russian Federation has conducted at least 4 drone attacks that have been larger in scale than this one that the Ukrainians conducted today. And the fact that the state of Ukraine has largely been able to survive most of those drone attacks and continue on the conflict and really make no major response to those particular attacks, but the Russian Federation suffers one attack of that scale and then immediately goes to threatening to fire multiple nuclear-capable intermediate-range ballistic missiles at Ukraine, is really showing that apparently this attack is really shaking up the faith, or at least the confidence, of the Russian government in being able to win the war or even continue on the conflict under these current kinds of conditions that the Ukrainians are facing them with. And it seems as though a lot of people are wondering whether the Russians would ever follow through on that statement that was made today by that defense head of the Duma or not. And it actually seems like the decent majority of people are actually believing that the Russians may fire another Oreshnik IRBM at Ukraine before a ceasefire proposition is even presented to them, or maybe even after a ceasefire proposition is officially presented to them. And it looks as though some people are saying that the Russians won't risk pissing the United States off, which, to be entirely honest with y'all, they've pissed us off plenty, so I don't really think we have to worry about that too much. And some people are saying that they'll probably wait a while, but they'll still launch the attack anyways. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so 51% of the audience said yes, Russia will fire another IRBM at a Ukrainian city, while 26% said no, the Russians won't risk pissing the United States off, and 14% said they'll probably wait a while. And on this one, basically, the big question is, are the Russians going to rush to failure like they like to do? And in this case, I would say probably not, because launching an IRBM is a very big deal, because once again, it's a nuclear-capable missile, and I think that the U.S. president might view that as a massive escalation, which once again is going to get headlines and prove that Russia is still attacking Ukraine nonstop, and they are not vying for peace, because right now the ball is in Russia's court. And if their response to the ceasefire deal is to launch a nuclear-capable missile at Ukraine, then I would say that would be viewed as basically telling the U.S. to piss off, which means telling the U.S. president to piss off, which means his ego gets insulted and things go south. So I would say they're probably going to wait a while. They're going to see how the ceasefire talks turn out. And once again, that'll be pretty much wrapped up in a couple of days. That's not going to take too long. Either Russia's going to be stupid about it or they're going to agree to it. And then after that, depending on the result, they'll probably end up launching one at that point, but not right this second. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say I believe that the Russians may actually fire an IRBM in Ukraine here soon. I think they're taking this as a measuring contest of what happened today in Moscow, and they're probably going to try and respond in the most severe way possible. This will probably end up doing them poorly. And I have seen some people say this, and I also want to make sure, because this is something that I've been seeing in the chat a little bit, so I'll address this really quickly. Some people say, and I'll have to say this, I've been very displeased by a lot of the actions that the office of the President of the United States has made in terms of foreign policy, particularly on the subject of Ukraine. Really, as far as things have been going against the Islamic Republic of Iran in China, I actually can't say that I'm that much displeased. I'm actually very happy with the direction things are going against Iran, and I'm fairly okay with what's going on with China. I think it could be a little bit more heavy-handed, and we could be a lot more resolute in our support for Taiwan, but generally, that direction is going not that bad. The one direction that has not been going well so far up until today was this one in Ukraine. And of course, many people have had many bad things to say, but I'm not one who gets into the idea of hating a person to the point that I don't think with logic and I look at something not for what it is, but more so for what the people are that are doing it. These actions that were made today were not that bad. And there was also a lot of additional statements made in the foreground after the conference was over by the President of the United States about what would happen as a result of specific Russian actions that would make it a little bit clear to me that while there is, in my opinion, a good bit of favor or bias that the President of the United States has had in favor of the Russians, it's not absolute bias in favor to the point that it's almost blindsided. We were able to hear some statements today, just to make this clear, and these statements are actually at word of mouth, not a written quote, but an actual video that I watched of the president, where he stated that the Russians can accept the ceasefire and stop the killing, or they can not accept the ceasefire, and the United States will ensure that the Ukrainians can kill more Russians than they've ever been able to kill before, largely ensuring that the Russians will largely suffer a faster death of their own design than they ever would have before if they don't accept the ceasefire. So there has to be a good amount of clear analysis here. I don't work off of bias, and and that's something that I got to make a little bit clear here for some folks, is that this is not supposed to be a political channel. I largely agree or disagree with things done in foreign policy by really any president if they do or do not make sense, and the actions that were made today are not that bad. If the Ukrainians present a ceasefire agreement to the Russians and they actually do accept the ceasefire and go into it in good faith somehow, which is highly unlikely, then that was actually a pretty decent arrangement. But at this point, the Ukrainians have put the Russians on the spot. The Russians have stated in propaganda and to the President of the United States that they love peace and they love walking through large pastures filled with flowers and smelling all of the lilacs. Now they have to actually follow up with that word for word in their actual actions. And if they do not follow through, they have completely blown apart, really for the entire public to see around the world, in the United States and Ukraine and all of Europe, that they aren't actually nice, lovable people. They are the people that the Ukrainians have been claiming that they are, which are bloodthirsty and looking for some form of conquest in Ukraine.
Yeah, what about that though? Like, the U.S. president, once again, I'm not trying to bash. I'm just simply going off the statements he's made in the past. He had said that he had spoken to the Russians, or his entourage had spoken to the Russians, and that the Russians indicated that they wanted peace at pretty much all cost. And it was Ukraine that was being extremely hard-headed and difficult to work with. So if the Russians already agreed in theory or in practice to go ahead and have peace, obviously a ceasefire, which is something the president has been pushing for weeks now, obviously Russia would have at least agreed over the phone or over some conversation to a ceasefire. So why all of a sudden is it a big if? Like, we're not really sure if the Russians are going to agree to a ceasefire, because I thought they'd already spoken to them.
Yeah, there's a lot of ambiguity with those kinds of statements. A lot of them probably being made as hype talk. But once again, though, at this point, also another thing that I got to say, the President of the United States has said, like Matthew's saying, that he's talked to Putin, and Putin loves peace. You know, he's never known anything but peace, and the Russians are peace-loving people. And now today he's coming out and saying they have a choice. They can either accept this or not, and if they don't, we're going to make sure that the Ukrainians can kill the entire Russian army overnight. So it really is starting to show that there may be a lack of confidence in the public statements that have been made that the Russians may actually accept this. There may be a bit of a fear in the background right now that the Russians will not accept the ceasefire, and then honestly, at that point, the president kind of looks a bit goofy, honestly foolish, because he's been claiming that the Russians are all for peace. They're now going to present them with a very fair ceasefire arrangement. It's not really showing any bias to either side at this point. And once again, military support and intelligence sharing has resumed in full today for Ukraine. So if the Russians deny that, the president kind of looks a bit like a fool for even following along with the Russians and this concept that they are peace-loving people. That's been completely thrown on its head if they reject the ceasefire. So that's
Do you think that was part of the plan? Do you think that maybe is the plan? Because it could be, because we don't know what's being discussed in the background. We don't know if the conversations are going good or bad. We're simply working off of what we're being told, which is very unreliable information, basically, which is basically coming out of the White House at this point. It's sort of flip-flopping all over the place. Could it be that this is the way to give the U.S. president an off-ramp, basically, because he's gone in really deep, saying that Ukraine's being difficult, and he's gone in pretty strongly saying that Russia is doing pretty good. They've been treated poorly by the Ukrainians and things like that, even though the Russians invaded. So is this his way to put Russia into an impossible situation where they're probably not going to agree to the ceasefire, and that if they reject it, and once again, they've already restarted military aid, so that's a done deal. And if Russia rejects it, then that simply justifies his position, and then they move on with the war like nothing ever happened, and the talks just crumble apart pretty much all the way around.
I think that's a decent likelihood at this point, really, to be honest. I don't think the Russians are going to accept the ceasefire, and I think that this is almost being structured in a way. I'll be honest with y'all, I think at this point, they may have gotten enough signaling in the background that the Russians really aren't looking for peace at all, that now the president of the United States is going to attempt to ambush Putin like he did Zelenskyy, to make it look like there's a reason that the war is going to keep going and it actually is good to support Ukraine. Because another thing that we do have to point out here, if the president of the United States was really just wanting to roughshod or ramrod the Ukrainians into ending the war, which I will agree, there's been some very heavy-handed and really morally questionable acts that have been made by the United States to really strong-arm the Ukrainians into this point, but if he was wanting to strong-arm them all the way into ending the war, couldn't he have told them that if they want military support to resume, they have to present the ceasefire to the Russians, have the Russians accept it, and then military support would resume? Because as of right now, like, there's actual proof of it. American support, it's been confirmed by the Ukrainian government, is already rolling back into Ukraine at the very moment that agreement was made by the United States and Ukraine in Riyadh. So it is showing that there may be some belief that the Russians are not going to accept the ceasefire, and they're already getting the gears going to just keep the war rolling like it has been for some time. And
this makes no sense. Honestly, I'm super happy, by the way. I'm not complaining about the aid getting restarted, because that's something that was desperately needed for Ukraine. And now it's been restarted, that was the leverage. That was the leverage for the mineral deal. That was the leverage over Ukraine having quote unquote peace talks. The leverage has been given away by the United States now. So it's like, apparently the mineral deal is not going to be really discussed very soon, I guess, because why would they give up the leverage by giving back the military aid? Because that was the whole point they withdrew it, was because they said that the guy wasn't willing to negotiate, meaning Zelenskyy. So, the logic here is fleeting me a little bit. Like, I'm not understanding it. But ultimately, though, I guess we can just be happy that aid's been restarted. But other than that, not really sure what they're really thinking in their heads.
And also, I'm seeing some people asking, you're expecting sense? Look, I don't know what to expect at this point, but I can only try and assess things on a logical standpoint. Otherwise, we don't have any analysis to work with at all. So, I got people who've got a point. Like, I'm not gonna diss on people who are saying, wait a minute, you're expecting sense. Look, I'm not gonna lie. I haven't even been able to really do analysis over the past few weeks because everything's been so nonsensical that there's really no way to even know what will happen tomorrow. So I know what people are saying with that, but at the same time, at this point, because to be entirely honest with y'all, the president's now about one step removed from the actual process, because we're now seeing that delegations are actually conducting the work. Now we're seeing that there's some more slightly seasoned people involved in the diplomacy. And while the president will still call the shots, those people are a lot more logical to follow. So with that in mind, this is becoming slightly logical enough that we can actually try and start getting back to some analysis or create some sort of likely routes of action for both sides, or what may be happening as a result of them. But I hope that does kind of touch the bases on that well enough, because before we get into the rest of the news tonight, because there's still an insanely large amount from literally every corner of the globe, and it's been about an hour and 10 minutes since we started the news, I do want to make sure that we get at least a couple of questions before we move on. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, and our first question of the night goes to John Underwood, who put in a very generous $50 donation. And thank you very much, John, for that $50 support, and we appreciate that very much. Very generous.
Hey!
And John says, Slava Ukraine and Herom Slava.
And Slava Ukraine and Herom Slava. And I gotta thank you, John Underwood, for the massive support, the largest support of the night, mind you. And I gotta thank you for that greatly once again, because if it wasn't for folks like you who enjoyed this channel and supported it and helped us to keep it running, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it rolling. It is very wild, crazy times that we're living in right now, and there are a whole bunch of wild things that are going on at this moment, but we are trying to make as much sense of them as possible and analyze them and get out the news for all of y'all so that we all know what's going on each and every day, or at least a little bit of what you might be able to expect in the next few days. And I hope that tonight, John Underwood, we've been able to do that fairly well, and I got to thank you massively for being an old guard and a channel legend, and always being with this channel, and always sending in kind words and supporting it, because folks like you have made this channel possible since day one. So a huge thanks to you so much once again, and of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to BC Skyman, who also throws in a very generous $50 support. And thank you, BC, as well, for always supporting the channel. And BC said, do you believe that Ukraine will also have security guarantees with the minerals deal? And if Russia refuses the ceasefire, will the U.S. and Europe supply every weapon that Ukraine needs to push them out of the country? And great job.
Very good questions, BC Skyman. I got to thank you so much for the support, and I got to thank you for asking such a great question, considering that I know, Matthew and me both know, that you're very heavily invested in this and really become a vocal voice in your area in support of Ukraine, in support of American and Western interest in Eastern Europe. And to answer your question, honestly, that sounded like the most political, like, presidential debate kind of a, like, intro to that. I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm going to have to roast myself on that one. That was horrendous sounding. That almost sounded corporate. But anyways, to answer your question, BC Skyman, I would say, let's see, let me make sure that I address it point to point. The Ukraine will also have security guarantees with the mineral deal. I didn't hear anything about that today in Riyadh. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if that will happen, at least right now. I think that the United States might be holding that as a card, so that way if the Russians reject the ceasefire deal, we then tack that on top. Or threaten attacking on top, so that way it tries to incentivize the Russians into accepting a ceasefire now before they get ratcheted down and largely screwed over, and then Ukraine may as well be a de facto member of NATO if they get American security guarantees. Because once again, we do have to remember that NATO in its very existence is a defensive alliance. It's just a giant security guarantee. So if the state of Ukraine gets American security guarantees, then that's pretty much bringing them into NATO. They're not technically in NATO by name, but considering that the United States, was the largest military power in the NATO alliance right now, would be giving Ukraine a security guarantee, it may as well be the same thing as getting in NATO. So with that in mind, I think that we might be holding that one back a bit, so that way we don't scare the Russians off initially, but I think we might threaten that if they don't seem to be that happy with going to the negotiating table. On the second point, if Russia refuses a ceasefire, will the U.S. and Europe supply every weapon that Ukraine needs to push them out of the country? I would have to say so, because trying to apply the most logical framework to this, and some people want to say that that's pointless, and maybe it is, like I can see an argument for that, but to try and apply the most logical framework that we can to this, the president, let's talk about this from a not really a domestic political position, but a somewhat political position on public opinion of the President of the United States and such things as that. So let's talk about it a little bit on that level. So right now, the President of the United States has been pushing this as his current speaking point, or his current soapbox, is that the Russian Federation wants peace, and they love peace, and we want the dying to stop. So we want to end the war in Ukraine, and we're going to do anything and everything we can to end the conflict, and really the only problem that we're having are the Ukrainians. So really, as of today, today, that entire idea is getting flipped on its head right now, because now the country that is presenting a ceasefire agreement to the other is the state of Ukraine and not the Russian Federation. So right now, the state of Ukraine is going, we actually do want peace. And so we are going to hand out an olive branch to the Russian Federation, a 30-day ceasefire to start things off on the right foot and to see that the killing actually does stop, at least for 30 days, so that we can see what kind of diplomatic progress we could make. So now at this point, the Russians are the ones that actually have the ball in their court. And depending on how the Russians play this, and depending on how the president reacts to it, he can end up looking like an absolute fool to everyone, including the people who have supported him in ending the war. If the Russians accept the ceasefire, that would be the best case scenario for the president of the United States, because it will make it look like he actually did strong-arm the Ukrainians into accepting a peace agreement, and then the Russians actually accepted it. And so it actually looks like he is working towards peace. If the Russians refuse the ceasefire agreement, or they make absurd terms before prerequisite to accepting the ceasefire agreement, the president of the United States is going to look like an absolute fool, even to his own followers, because he has stated so far, and we have to remember that the proof is in the pudding for the large part with how things would turn out. He has stated that the Ukrainians are obstinate on wanting peace. Now the Ukrainians are not. They're actually accepting a ceasefire arrangement, or at least presenting one to the Russians. If the Russians refuse that, it actually is showing that the entire time, it wasn't the Ukrainians that were not wanting peace, it was the Russians that weren't wanting peace. So now the whole thing, even for the president and his supporters, is a 180. It's being flipped on its head at that point, because now the Ukrainians actually did take a shot at peace, which we've all seen multiple times, and then the Russians are shooting it down. So then that means that the president will be presented with two options. He can either try and justify the Russians shooting down the ceasefire attempt, which means that the president would have to accept that his ceasefire arrangement was stupid, or it was just wildly flawed. That's another way to put it, which the president simply couldn't do that. I mean, you know, that would make him look like a fool. You know, it's like he comes up with a ceasefire agreement, presents it to the Russians, says it's a great ceasefire agreement, and then they shoot it down because it's bad, and then he's going to say it's bad? No, he would never say that. And also that gets in the way, you know, of course, because the president is a human and he has certain traits. The president is a bit narcissistic. So, you know, the president thinks that everything he does is great. So if the Russians say that the ceasefire proposition that he made, which is a great plan, is stupid, then they're insulting him, and that's not going to go well for him. He's going to pretty much go straight into providing Ukraine military support at that point, because the Russians have made him look stupid. And then if they deny the ceasefire again under this other option, then the president has the off-ramp to be able to say, actually, you know, it appears that the Russians have deceived us all, and the Russians are really the dogged bastards, and the Ukrainians actually have been looking for peace. Look, they tried for a ceasefire, and the Russians shot it down, so let's make sure that the Ukrainians can really ensure that they are able to push the Russians out, or beat them down hard enough that we can get incredibly amicable terms for American and Western interests inside of Ukraine. So really at this point, I think if the Russians did deny the ceasefire, there really is no other way for the president to go, keeping up public reputation, which by the way, I forgot to add this in. The president cannot run for a second term, a third term. He's already in a second term right now, but the faith in the party that he's attached to on a domestic level is heavily tied to the actions he makes right now. Kind of like how a lot of people have made the argument, and I guess it would be proof to show that the prior president's political party didn't win this election, that a current president and their actions, if viewed poorly by the public, can heavily dictate the outcome of a next election. Meaning that he can't look weak, and especially considering that he's presented himself to his supporters as a strong man, if he goes out of his way to look weak to the Russians and pretty much let them beat him around, then he's not going to look good. He's going to make his party look poorly, and they could suffer tremendously in the next election, meaning that he could lose faith in from his party in the Congress, and he could also lose faith of major party supporters, meaning that he could start to lose a lot of his grip that he may currently have inside the Congress. So he has to make sure that he looks strong if the Russians reject the ceasefire agreement, and that means that they probably will end up supplying everything to boot to the Ukrainians so they can actually beat the Russians down and then force them into the negotiating table, much like we've always been saying, under America and the West's terms, more so than the Russians' terms. So I hope that does address that the best I can, BC Scam, and really go over my entire analysis of it. Whether it's right or wrong, I guess we'll see. Of course, I'm not an absolute expert on this. I've only been covering it for 3 years, and there's a lot of people out there who've been doing things like this for far longer than Matthew and me have, but still, that would be my understanding and perception of all the different options and paths that could be taken by the President of the United States, depending on the Russians' actions. But I think if the Russians reject the ceasefire, he is largely forced at that point to support the Ukrainian armed forces and to support the conflict on the Ukrainian side, because what other choice would he have, considering all of the public perception outlooks and also the American standing in the world and what that would look like at that point. Although in other areas with tariffs and things, it isn't looking too great, there is still the power projection side of things to be considered, and it would look poorly if he got beat around by the Russians. So with that,
I think if the president, and once again, I'm not saying it's a certainty because nothing's a certainty right now, but I think if the president was going to do a flip-flop on this, he wouldn't have put Russia in such a corner, because right now Russia is in a corner. Like the enforcer was saying, if Russia says no to this, it's going to make the president look really bad. And there's really no way to simply just walk your way out of that, or simply say, oh, look, like the Russians just want a little bit extra term, because this current deal has got the blessing of the president right now. And you don't tell this current guy, based on his personality, that he's wrong, because that's the one thing that's going to set this guy off like crazy, is telling this guy he's wrong. Because of that ego. So, the Russians really can't say no to this unless they want to go basically at odds with the U.S. president, which makes him look like a fool. So I think that might have been purposeful at this point. And with the restarting of aid, like literally before the deal's even signed, there's been no signed deal right now, but yet aid's been restarted. To me, that's an indicator that it's kind of going this way of supporting Ukraine all the way. But of course, it might change. You never know. But for now, it looks like it's going that way.
So with that, I hope that does address that well, BC Scammon, at least in our opinion. And I thank you so much for the massive support and being a channel legend as well, because folks like you have made this channel possible and help us to keep this thing running day in and day out. And if it wasn't for folks like you who went out of your way to support the channel when you didn't even have to, we wouldn't be able to make the analysis that we make every single day and cover the news that we make every single day too. And I also got to thank everyone for watching our video today. Crazily enough, we are literally just a handful of subscribers away from reaching 338,000 again, funnily enough. But I got to thank everyone who watched that today, and I also got to thank everyone who's here right now, the 9.2 thousand of y'all, because it's really crazy to think that we still are a reliable source of news for many. But one thing I do also want to say is that I see this is something that we have to deal with, and I think I'll try and touch the base on this a little bit, is that this channel is not political, okay? Like, I hate to tell y'all that I'm not like a political shrew like other people, where I'm left-leaning or right-leaning, so I always have to condemn the right or the left, or praise the right and the left. That's not how this channel works. This channel works for whatever is in America's interest. I really, at the end of the day, as far as the cards we're playing in the world, or really in foreign affairs, it doesn't really matter who the person is. I've seen in the chat, like we've been seeing for other days, when we've said that the president's foreign policy decisions are bad, a lot of Republicans want to come out and bash us greatly for saying that the president's foreign policy decisions are bad, because to them, the president, who is a member of the Republican Party, is God and we can't criticize him. And then when we say that an action of the president of the United States might have been decent, like we do today, then a whole bunch of people from the other political party, which is the left, want to come out and then start bashing us because we're saying that the president might have done something okay. I'm not really here to try and appease either side. Unfortunately, if that's what you're looking for, this isn't really your channel. This channel is one that looks out for American interests for the large part, and Western interests as a whole. So when I talk about things, I'm not talking about them on a domestic political mindset where if the president is a Republican or a Democrat, every single action they make is terrible and we have to hate them. I'm largely looking out for what will be the most beneficial for the United States, or try and figure out a way, if we were to play the cards we were dealt today, how it would end up good. That's really what we do. That's what analysis is. If you're wanting just a hard left or a hard right mindset, that's more so editorialism, and we don't really do that on this channel. This is more so analysis. So with that in mind, I hope that a lot of y'all understand that, because I just don't really get where a lot of people are coming from with the criticism, because this is the way the channel's been for 3 years. It's the way it's always going to be. We're not going to be changing that for anyone. So, if you like it and you really do enjoy it, you can always tell us that in the chat, or you can support the channel or whatever you would like to do. But if you don't like that, I don't really know what to say to you, because, I hate to tell you, no matter how many people don't like if I say something good or bad about any president in terms of foreign policy and what they're doing, it's not going to change the fact that we're going to keep saying it. So with that, I hope that does at least give a little bit of a disclaimer to some that hopefully touches that base there, because, we're always getting hammered these days no matter what we say, and I'm trying to make sure that our analysis is neutral as possible. Public opinion on whether they like someone or not isn't going to change that. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And Matthew, I believe that we are one super chat away from getting right back into the news.
Yes, and this one goes to Eric Horner, LSA, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Eric, as well, for the support, and we appreciate it very much. Also, Eric's another longtime channel legend, just like John and BC as well. And Eric said, for the coffee fund, and like always, I appreciate y'all and what y'all do, and check out the Tennessee state flag and give your thoughts, and LSA.
And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, Eric Horner, you are a legend of the Leaf Spring Army. I got to thank you for being around for an incredibly long time and continuing to support the channel. And thank you so much for appreciating what we do and supporting the coffee fund. And we will make sure to check out the Tennessee flag, which is an interesting one. Let me actually go get the flag. So this is the flag of the state of Tennessee.
It's a very interesting flag. I'll be honest with you. It's I don't remember the Tennessee flag looking like this, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's looked like this forever, I think. I've never actually seen a different version of the flag of the state of Tennessee. I don't know what I actually think about it. It's odd. I don't know how to explain it. I just don't know. I don't know where to go with it. Because it's weird. Also, for some, to be entirely honest, I think that the blue, the blue flash, if you want to call it that, here on the side of the flag, it should be on the other side, because this is what it actually looks like hanging off of a flagpole, and I feel like the blue would look a lot better if it was actually strung along the actual flagpole line instead of the other side. It's just a little bit bizarre with that. But beyond that, I personally do not know what to think of this flag. But there are some flags, though, that I think really did well with, the design of the flag. For example, the flag of Ohio. When you look at this flag, you know they got Gyats in Ohio. It's just such a recognizable flag. And not only that, it's oddly shaped. It's more of a pendant than an actual normal flag. And that's something that I like about it.
Is it true that they're down in Ohio, like Skibbity Toilet?
Yeah, Skibbity Toilet and all that. That's what this flag represents. Their anthem is Skibbity Toilet these days up there in Ohio. But also, another cool flag is the flag of Wyoming, which is a very cool flag. I think it's actually really neat.
Honestly, it looks pretty interesting. I'm not going to dog on it too much, but the seal, it looks like it's offset or something, but it's not in the center of the buffalo, so it's bothering me a bit. But other than that, it looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's maybe a critique. It looks like it's actually different per flag. Look at this one. The seal is actually centered on the buffalo on that one.
Yeah, I like that one better. That looks cleaner.
And on this one, honestly, it looks like there's no official pattern for the Wyoming flag. Look at that one.
Yeah, that right there looks like a knockoff, like a Bing Shaling version of it or something.
Man, this thing isn't even called a buffalo. It's called a something else, like a beast or something. I don't even know. But also another cool flag to bring one up would be California's. California has a very iconic state flag. I think it's really cool. And that bear also looks like it's going to steal your beer at your camp, when you're having a campfire and all that. But still, a really cool flag. Texas also has a really cool flag.
Also, by the way, you know something interesting about that California bear back there? You know something fascinating?
What?
They recruited that bear off of Skid Row in Los Angeles. That bear came from Skid Row, and they put it on the flag. It was the big break. They put it on the flag. They gave it literally one patch of artificial Costco grass, and they took the photo, and that became the flag.
Man, that face, now that you give me that context, is actually not going to go steal your beer. It's going to go strip the copper out of your wires, at your house. Now we have that context. Very different kind of a bear. But still, Texas flag is iconic as well. One flag I actually don't like, actually it's a series of flags, I guess you could call it, is the Alabama state flag, because it's just lame. It's just a St. Andrew's cross in red on a white field. Like, it's...
Well, I'll be. That flag gives me some flashbacks to other things too. I tell you, I can't really tell what it is, but it reminds me of something.
Well, interestingly enough, it actually has almost nothing to do with the Confederacy. Like the St. Andrew's Cross is there, but loads of flags use the St. Andrew's Cross. I mean, like the flag of Scotland uses the St. Andrew's Cross. Well, they call this the flag of Alabama. That is not the flag of Alabama. That is Scotland. But beyond that, there's loads of flags that use St. Andrew's crosses. But the one that probably looks the closest to the Confederate flag is the Novorossiya flag, which is right here. This is like literally the Confederate flag without the stars. Like, no joke.
Yeah. Honestly, it kind of looks just like it, really.
Yeah, it's bizarre, man. And the Russians are like, this is an all new original design. It's like, no. You're wrong. It's like this isn't new or original. But anyways, Alabama flag is not that great, but also Florida's isn't that great because it's literally the same design, just with a seal on it. And the seal is also way too detailed for an actual usable flag.
Honestly, I like the seal, though. It kind of takes your attention away from what it kind of looks like.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, I suppose. Georgia has a really cool state flag, too. Like, this is a really cool one. But let's see here. What else? What other cool ones? I think Mississippi got a new flag, and it actually looks a lot better, in my opinion. This was their old flag. Not really that great. This is the new one. Really neat. Like, I actually think that's actually pretty cool, and it has the Camilla, which is the state flower on it. I thought that was a pretty nice flag design. It doesn't look that good flying, though. Like, neither of them did. But this one doesn't really look that good when it's flying, but displayed, like, flush on a flat surface, I actually think it looks incredibly good. But anyways, we got to make sure to get y'all back to the news because we are starting to get late in the night here, and we could go talking about state flags all night long. Also, Matthew, I cannot move on without saying that this was a state flag proposal.
Oh my goodness, that the tree doesn't even have leaves. I don't even know what that is. It's like parts of a leaf spring or something.
Man, dude, it's like, well, and what is this flag supposed to represent? It's supposed to represent that we're power. It's like, oh, it's like, well, I mean, it's like devoid of color, I guess, I don't know. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get on out of this question. I mean, huge thanks to you once again, though, for supporting the channel and helping it to keep on running, because it is folks like you, Eric Horner, who make this thing possible and keep it rolling, and I hope we are able to address that well, and at least look at some other U.S. flags, too. But with that, it is time for us to move on into the rest of the news, and we have an insanely high amount of it, and I am going to have to pick up the pace a little bit, sadly. So moving on over into North Korea, we did hear that the North Koreans did threaten that they were going to go to nuclear war over the military exercises in South Korea, in between the United States and South Korea. It seems as though they're getting a little angry about that whole thing. But beyond that, it does appear that the U.S. is trying to walk back its anti-Ukraine stance with its current actions. Or is the U.S. trying to walk back its anti-Ukraine stance with its current actions? That should be more so asked as a question than made as a statement. And it looks like a lot of people are actually believing that the U.S. is reversing course. Some people are thinking that's just temporary. Some people are thinking that the United States is just trapping Zelenskyy. I mean, call them a French voyeur, because a voyageur, I mean, that's actually, the other one's totally different. But call them a French voyageur because they're out there in the frontier and they're trapping, specifically not fur, but Zelenskyy. But some other people are saying that they're unsure and undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So only 19% thinks the U.S. is trapping, while 41% said, yes, the U.S. is reversing course, and 22% said it's all just temporary actions and it could go away at pretty much any moment. And like I said before, I would say the U.S. seems to be trying to reverse course. They're trying to take an off-ramp here. And once again, it could change. I'm not going to commit to anything at this point because it's very unpredictable with this current administration. So it could change at any point. But for right now, based on what we're seeing, the U.S. is reversing course and they're trying to back Russia into a corner. And right now, the ball's in Putin's court and Putin doesn't know how to really dribble. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I think that the United States might be reversing course, possibly, so I'd have to be with the 41%, but, that's not a hard yes on that or like a definitive answer. It it could be subject to change. But with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. But moving on from that and into the area of Pakistan, we've been able to hear that an entire express train with 200 people on board was hijacked today by a terrorist group supported by Iran. They have hijacked the Jafar Express train. Has no relation to the movie Aladdin whatsoever, and has taken hundreds of passengers hostage. The group is threatening to execute the hostages if security forces launch an operation. They are demanding the release of all prisoners held by Pakistan that were a member of their terrorist group previously. We have also been able to hear in other news that the Yemenis are now saying they're going to start attacking merchant ships passing through the southern Red Sea again. Hey, looks like they're going to be getting a couple of JDAMs dropped on their heads, but we'll see what happens with that. Moving on out of that and into the United States, we were able to hear some other big news that the pause on military aid has been lifted, and U.S. military aid and support will be continuing again, along with intelligence information, as Matthew went, and then just cut out completely. But moving on.
That damn Mike, I tell you what, he cut off the perfect part. He cut off the loud part. The part that everybody wanted to hear, but not really.
And Mark Evans said, why was my post blocked? I don't know. YouTube doesn't like some words. Some words they do not like. Maybe they blocked it. I do not know. But moving on out of the Washington, D.C. area and the statements from the White House today, we were also able to hear that it appears that Canada is continuing on retaliation for the U.S. tariffs that were implemented against them that were quite substantive. A 25% tariff has currently been put in place on all Canadian goods entering the United States. In exchange, today, the Ontario Premier threatened to shut off the electricity to, I believe it was Michigan, New York, and Wisconsin, I think. But it appears that has been rescinded. They are giving like a 3-week stay of execution on that order, at least for now. But we've also been able to hear that the Canadians are now eyeballing the possible sale of U.S. Treasury bonds as the Canadians hold a whopping $328 billion in U.S. bonds, which is actually a significant amount, mind you. So they are considering that as a form of retaliation at this point. But it appears that the current trade war going on between Canada and the United States is only heating up. And we do not really know where this is going to be going in the future, to be entirely honest with y'all. But moving on from that, wait a minute, before we move on, Matthew, I guess you could say that the whole trade war thing is a little electric. Get it? Because they're talking about the power grid.
I tell you what, man, it's electric. I'm telling you. I just don't know what's happening with this whole situation right here. They said cut off the electricity, and then we said we're going to ramp it up a little extra. And then Canada said, oh, yeah, you're a tough guy. You're going to give it to you. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, a little break. Let's take a break. 3 weeks. Come on, little break. It's like, well, okay. I'm like, I'm glad it's not going down the way I think, but I think the damage might be already done. But, hopefully it can reverse course, maybe.
Man, everyone was yelling, F you, and then the Canadians said, how about lunch? And then the U.S. said, yes, I'm quite famished, actually. What would you like to eat? It's like, oh, okay, well, I think that might be happening, though, Matthew, because I think both sides are starting to understand the sheer damage that's being caused. I mean, let's go look at, let me go show y'all this, because this also may be a reason why it seems like everyone's apt to kind of put this behind them. That is what the stock market's been doing, and it's not doing well. It went from around 44,627 points. It's now down to 41,433 as of today. So it's not doing that well in the United States. As a matter of fact, it's doing badly. This is the lowest the stock market's been all year. It actually did rally quite significantly leading up to the inauguration and right after, but since then, it's been on a gradual slide downhill and then a rapid decline downhill.
It's not going to be just us, though. Like, the truth is, situations like this, and once again, folks, I'm not making a political comment. I know people are going to go berserk and stuff. There's already somebody going berserk a minute ago. It's going to hurt Canada and the United States almost equally. Like, this, nobody's going to benefit from this, because if Canada does something, then the United States escalates it, then Canada escalates, and they both keep escalating. It's just hurting the civilians in both countries. That's all it's going to do. And then at the end of the day, when everybody decides, okay, this is destroying both of our countries, let's reset and go right. By that point, everybody's been wrecked. Their wallets have been drained dry. And then at that point, the civilians are hurting, but the government's just like shaking hands going, okay, let's just go back to normal. It's like, but at that point, you've already wrecked the economy. So it's not that good.
I say what we should do right now in response to this is that this was a bad choice to put tariffs on the Canadians and the Mexicans. Like, just speaking about these particular instances, the European Union is almost the same thing. But it was a bad idea. What we need to do is we need to speak to them asked them to lift their tariffs. We will lift ours simultaneously, and we continue to follow the trade regulations that we are bound to by the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. They were fairly amicable terms in the USMCA. They weren't bad at all, and I think it would be much better to return to that and make sure that everyone's economy is continuing to climb instead of everyone equally suffering in Canada and the United States, because of pretty much what's turned into an economic spitting match. But moving on from that and out of that bit of news, and on out of Canada and the United States, it's now time for us to move on into Europa, where we were able to hear that the French are completely rejecting the idea of Ukraine conducting any form of demilitarization. We do not believe that that would even be happening at all at this point, because the United States is now resuming military aid, so it doesn't really appear that they're adamant on seeing the Ukrainians get pretty much neutered militarily. But it is good to see that the French are openly supporting Ukraine continuing to have a bite and some teeth in the future if they ever need to in a conflict. Also, we were able to see a really cool clip today coming out of Stockholm in Sweden, where we got to see a B-52 of the U.S. Air Force flying over, escorted by Swedish Gripens over the capital. It was cool.
Hey, wait a minute. I thought we were stopping all the military exercises.
Nah. Nah.
Hey, guess what? Hey, Billy. Ramp the throttle up and go straight to Moscow, would you?
Man, that's the envoy heading to Moscow. It's called the dumb bombs, like M84s.
See, we're sending over Billy. Who's Billy, Bliat? He's a 500-pound bomb, and he's coming to say hello.
We have the greatest diplomats. They're a little explosive. They're green and don't look like people. They look more like bombs. But we're bringing them to Moscow. We're going to drop them on Moscow. We're going to say, bomb, baby, bomb. It's going to be an absolute hit. It's going to be great. Man. It's going to be huge, believe me. We're going to cut down all of our trees. We're going to use them to build a giant bridge to Russia. And we're going to go over there and we're going to whip their asses straight off the bridge. They call it building bridges, and we're going to be burning down their bridges. Really great thing. Hopefully that would be what would happen, but you never know. You never know. But absolutely crazy stuff.
Wouldn't that be wild, though? Wouldn't that be wild if the U.S. just sent that B-52 on over there and they said, send it on over to Moscow. We want Billy to go on over there. That would honestly be a little bit crazy, and I'm not sure if that's ever possible, but, it may happen one day.
That would be a little bit unwise, I would have to say. I think that many people would be regretting that. That would certainly affect the trout population. The trouts would not be doing that great. A lot of people would be saying, where are the trouts? Where are the trouts? And I would be bringing back the trouts. We would have so many trouts, you'd get tired of trout. You would be going, please stop making more trouts. And no, we're going to keep cooking up trout. We're going to have so much trout. It's going to replace your eggs. Well, no one can get eggs, so we're going to be eating caviar eggs instead of chicken eggs. It's going to be great. By the way, don't look at the stock market. It's not doing that great. But moving on from that, we're going to be moving on into Kyiv, where we were able to see a German Gepard provided to the Ukrainians in action. And I love these things. I absolutely love the Gepards. Germany cooked when they made this thing. It is just the best looking anti-air, self-propelled anti-aircraft gun ever made.
It's not a bad gun right there. That spinny dish, that's a good thing. I like that a lot. That's a good deflector.
Oh, look at the eyeball. Look at the, dude, he hid. It was like, I'm scared. And then, turned around and looked away.
Don't be shy. Look out into the field.
S.I. Sanchez said, that thing looks sick. It's not sick like a dog. It's not sick like that. We don't need to put it down. They're eating the cats. They're eating the dogs. And they're shooting down Russian drones. Look at them shoot them down. Really impressive stuff. Let's look at this chart. I love charts. We, for some reason, didn't like them in the past. Now we got to look at them all day long. Oh, they blew it up. Look at that. Really big explosion. Beautiful explosion. A great big explosion. People have never seen an explosion like that before. People have said that was a record bigger than the Tsar Bomba. And we could see them driving it around the fields, shooting at more Russian drones. And S.I. Sanchez said, damn, I dread when people try to pronounce my name. Well, at least I didn't pronounce it as badly as Trending Agua, that criminal organization in Colorado. It's absolutely something really crazy when you think about it, really crazy. But moving on from that, we were able to hear the air defense report, and it was actually a pretty good air defense report. We were able to hear that Ukraine was attacked by 126 drones and 1 Iskander, of which 79 drones and 1 Iskander-M were directly shot down, and another 35 drones missed their target due to electronic warfare interference. So it does appear that the air defense last night was largely successful, with an interception rate of around 78%, meaning that most Russian drones did not make it to their target. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear some additional news inside of the Kursk Oblast that has not appeared to be incredibly well. It appears that the Ukrainians are abandoning the area possibly, or starting to fall back and greatly reduce their front line, one or the other. We were able to see that the Russians did leverage a large amount of helicopter support today inside of the Kursk region, which could be seen here. And I'm going to keep that full volume. And we actually see the rare sighting of an Mi-28 right there. There's not many of them, and we haven't seen them used a lot so far in the conflict.
It's the rich man filming this. The guy's living in a compound.
Dude, this man's got, like, the soundproofing stuff around it, and there goes the Su-25s. I don't know why they set that up to look like a movie scene, I'm not going to lie. Like, the helicopters passed and the planes rode over. It was actually not that, not like a bad sight. It actually looked kind of cool. But meanwhile, we did get to hear that the Russians did claim major successes today. They did claim that they took 12 villages. At the time that was published, we could only confirm that they took about 4. Now, at this point, it looks to be about 6, as we were able to confirm that the Russians have taken everything north of Malaya Leknia and have also taken the town of Malaya Leknia as well. Possibly showing that the Ukrainians have completely withdrawn from this area due to the rapidity of the Russian advance. But we can see a Russian here standing on top of a antenna near to Malaya Leknia, waving a Russian flag, appearing to be unopposed in the area, showing that the Ukrainians may not even be nearby to Malaya Leknia and may have withdrawn all the way to Sudza at this point, or a village just outside of Sudza.
The Russians act like they really did something by retaking their own land.
Look at them. They started the war, they got invaded in return, and then they take back their land. They act like it's a big thing. I gotta tell you, I like countries that don't lose their land when they started the war in the first place. Really sad, really pitiful. But moving on from that and on into our next clip, we also got to see it a second time from another view. And here we can see them flying up to the guy standing on top of the antenna. I guess they told him to stand there until a Ukrainian FPV hits him eventually. I don't know. Because he was up there for a while, it seemed. But moving on from that little clip and on down into Sudza, we did hear that possibly the Ukrainians may have left Kursk, or maybe in the process of retreating or withdrawing from Kursk. Either way you look at it. Once again, we're not entirely sure. We do not know. And there have been some statements, I don't know if Matthew's been able to corroborate these, that the Ukrainians are officially withdrawing from Kursk, but so far we can't really tell exactly what's going on in the area, but the Ukrainians have lost a little bit of ground. So Matthew, do you have any...
Yeah, but so far what I've heard, it's been very murky. There's no concrete statements as to whether or not the Ukrainians actually have withdrawn. My best assumption is the Ukraine's doing some sort of limited withdrawal because we are getting some anecdotal reports that they're moving some forces out of Kursk, but nothing official. And also, like you said, the Russians are making bold claims saying they've taken a ton of villages, and so far we've only corroborated about 4 or so. So between those two things, it's real murky. But generally speaking, the Ukrainians probably are going to be moving out, from what I can tell.
And with that, we are going to be moving on from the Kursk Oblast and on into our location unknowns, which we have a limited number of, but we were able to hear that the SAMP, which is provided by the French, it's a French-Italian hybrid vehicle that was jointly developed by both countries. It's employed and used by both of them, but this one was specifically provided by the French, according to what we've heard, and it was able to shoot down a Sukhoi aircraft, according to what they said. So it looks like the SAMP is out there samping around a little bit and taking care of business, I guess you could say. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to hear of some major advances being made by the Russians in the technological field. I will be showing you all this right here. This is truly an innovation of Russian abilities to conduct firepower on the move and transport troops safely. It is a new kind of a cope cage. It's a mix of the Shed and also the normal cope cage from earlier on in the war. It is awfully terrible. It's so bad.
It's horrible. It's so rusty too. All I see here, someone said it's a bit bouncy. Oh, that's Gene maybe in the live chat over there. Look at that. Also, someone said, like, what the hell, Russia? Honestly, really, what the hell is this?
That thing looks like a Tesla Cybertruck, really terrible. Now they took the cage off of it. They took the cage off. Turn off the cage. Turn off the cage. It's looking terrible. Turn it off. And we can see them firing again here. Almost in an indirect artillery support kind of a way with the tank.
Are these tanks' windows bulletproof? There are no windows. Funny.
Throws a tungsten ball at it. It caves in the middle of the demonstration. It's like, maybe that isn't bulletproof. Maybe. And with that, that's the end of that clip. But once again, not really an innovation. But moving on from that and into the Russian casualty report, we were able to see that there was some interesting losses today. Oh,
man, look at that. They got 2 Bobcat skid steers. That's better than 0, I must say. Obviously better than 0. I like the +2, but Enforcer, tell us more.
and we gotta say, the losses are juicy today. Ms. Disa, keeper of the record, stated that troop losses jump up in all categories over 7-day averages. 75 artillery systems lost is the second highest daily loss of the entire war, and 198 drones shot down is the third highest daily loss of the war, meaning that we got incredibly close to hitting some records here tonight. But let's get into those near record-breaking figures. We have been able to see that 1,300 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 23 APCs, 134 supply trucks, 11 main battle tanks, 75 artillery systems, 198 drones, 2 MLRSs, 1 cruise missile, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and 2 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, it appears that it was a very good day today, and I guess you could say good morning, Ukraine E. It's going to be another wonderful day. But moving on from that and over into the Vovchansk front, we were able to see that the Russians were getting slammed. Oh!
Nasty. The Ukrainians are doing the nasty on them.
And we can see them just hitting them. Think nasty. That's Frosty the Snowman thing. It's like the guy's hanging on the bottom of a train saying there, I'll get them. Think nasty. Think nasty. It's like, I don't think that aged well.
On, bro?
It's just like,
what are you talking about? Hanging on the bottom of a train, trying to lurk around, stalking, talking about think nasty. It's like, what do you mean by that?
Bro, Andrew Tate was hanging off the bottom of that thing.
Oh my goodness. What color is your train?
Oh man, well, you're running your train. It's like, well, no, it's a rough one. And we see them here hitting more Russians. Marcia Braga said, when is the ceasefire? We do not know. It's going to be offered to the Russian. It's a great offer, a beautiful offer. No other offers like it. A great offer. But if they don't accept it, we're going to bomb the Russians into oblivion, and we're going to force them to accept the end of the war on our terms. Hopefully. That's what I'd expect, at least. So I hope that answers your question.
Some say the Russians have been pre-approved for a ceasefire deal, but the pre-approval is contingent upon their credit score, which happens to be in the negative 100s.
Some people have said that they looked at their credit score and it was the lowest credit score in history, much like the ratings of CNN. Absolutely terrible. Some people have been going, wow, how does it get that low? How do you do that? And they just do it because they're magic like that. They're Russians, and somehow they can always get a low credit score, but they always got a bottle of vodka in their hand. They got enough credit score for that. I promise you that. But moving on from that and on into the near to Shebekino, we did get to see the Ukrainians were conducting some deeper artillery fire, hitting Shebekino and starting some fires.
Ну, не сейчас, минут 10-15 назад. Горит.
That's the end of that clip. And moving on from that and down near Vovchansk, we also get to see the Ukrainian border guards hitting some Russians too.
Man, their border patrol doesn't play around.
Man, they are slamming them. Man, we're going to strengthen the border. It's like, I don't think you can do it as well as Ukraine. It's like their border guards are literally armed. It's like, there's a big difference there. It's a great, big, beautiful front line. We're going to build a wall around the Russians with high explosive and make them pay for it. They're going to pay very dearly. But that scene in that clip, nice to see the border guards doing their work. And moving on from that and a little bit further on down the lines and into the area of Seversk, we did get to see the Russians also getting hit around Seversk, as it appears that Russian soldiers tried to attack the positions of the 54th, but were swiftly repelled, as we can see here.
Oh, you're kidding me. You mean the Russians rushed to failure? I mean, that's a shocker.
It really is a shocker. Look at it. Now they're running their own people over. It's always a great disaster. Here we can see the Russians running their own people over. It is a fact of life that the Russian Federation continuously mows their own people over, not with gunfire, but with cars.
I don't know how that must feel to have that lot of, like, run your foot over. I don't know how it must feel to have a Lotta catch on fire like that with you in it.
With how cartoonish the Lotta looks when it runs over your foot, you do that kind of like a thing from like a cartoon. Like you have to. Like I'm sure it's like reflex.
I feel like it would be like a golf cart running over your foot or something, but surely a Lotta doesn't weigh a whole bunch. So if it ran over your foot, maybe break a couple of your little bones in the feet, but maybe it might be recoverable.
Man, I mean, maybe. But we can also see the Phoenix unit, the Phoenix. Like the rising from the ashes, they were hitting Russians all over the place.
What do we got? Credits or something? What they they're rolling the credits? The movie just started.
Well, the movie started for the Ukrainians, but it's ending for these Russians.
The Russians wanted to be a star, and now they're starring in their own films.
Dun, 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 dun. You know that Shooting Star song? I can't really do it well, but you know what I mean.
Captain Orc, I love your films.
Captain Russia, I'm a great fan of your films. Rips your face off. It's like, wait a minute, I thought you were red. No, it's like, I ripped my skin off. It's like, this is my raw muscle. Well, I thought that joke was going to land. I thought that was going to be like
I
a
mean,
reference.
it was pretty good. I didn't understand it, but I mean,
you know, like the Red Skull guy, you know, like the Red Skull guy, you know, like this guy right here, you know.
You're talking about this guy.
Well, yeah, that's the Captain America. I'm a great fan of your films guy. You know, like I thought you.
I just remember the line, man. I don't remember this guy. This guy right here is straight up muscle in the face.
But you know, he was that guy, and then he pulled his face off, and like the reference was that, like instead of ripping your face mask off, and it was like you had a red skull, like you ripped your skin off your face, and there was like just exposed muscle under.
I got you.
That was like the joke, but it just right over, right over because the reference was not understood. But I hope that everyone gets that now. I had to explain that for like a minute. Hopefully it didn't fall flat on everyone else. But but anyways, the Russians are getting hit down near Kurtamivka. Check it out. Oh, and there's a lone Russian out there. They're taking the jaunt. They're taking the trip. How many flight miles are they about to get, folks? How many flight miles? Well, let's get ready. Let's count. All right, on 3. 1, 2, 3. And it looks like they just got a couple. They're getting a couple of flight miles there. And we see them just hitting them over and over again, just driving through, just clearing it out. Nice to see. Beautiful to see. Moving on from that, and down past Pokrovsk, we didn't actually get any footage from Touretsk or Pokrovsk today. A little bit odd with that. But moving on from that and down towards Belohi, we also get to see them hitting some Russian forces in the south. They've been hitting them good. Real good. Incredibly good, as a matter of fact. Also, Matty, we already passed over the North Korean news. It was a little bit, it was like an hour, you know, so. But anyways, moving on from that, we were able to see that they were hitting the Russians here.
Man, look at these trenches. They put them in zigzags for once.
Man, they putting them in zigzag. But you know one thing that ain't zigzagging? The Russians. They zigging, but they ain't zagging.
They forgot that part. That wasn't taught in training.
They zig, but they don't zag. You know, like whatever the Seinfeld voice is.
I don't think the Russians are taught anything in training now that I think about it. I'm not really sure what they're taught except for obey the superiors, блядь.
And get no pay. Like, no pay. You'd get no money. But moving on from that, we also got to see them shooting down a drone near Kherson today. Oh, the Ukrainians, they've always been known for their excellence. There is a Kherson Ukrainian inspired by that same Kievan excellence. That is the 1,126 Air Defense Brigade. And they got it. Oh, beautiful. Moving on from that clip and on into our next one. Y'all are going to be real surprised with this because this actually is a bit of a tragedy. We were able to see that the Russians did go out of their way today to attack a Barbados-flagged cargo ship carrying wheat from Odessa to another port outside the Black Sea. You could actually see the impact right there on the vessel. And then later on, we were actually able to see the actual damage on board the vessel. From what we understand, 4 crew members were killed. There were 3 Syrians on board and 1 Ukrainian sailor that was killed in the attack that the Russians conducted against a grain vessel. Very unfortunate thing, once again showing in the middle of the Ukrainians attempting to present a ceasefire to the Russians are still going out of their way to pretty much attack innocent civilians. They're just going about their daily lives at this point in the conflict. But moving on from that, and on up to Kyiv, it is now time for us to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 1112 of the war. And so, without further ado...
Бажаю здоров'я.
Oh, it happened a little early there. Without further ado, here is the speech. Speech!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Щойно була доповідь нашої делегації про зустріч з американською командою в Саудівській Аравії. Більшу частину дня сьогодні тривала розмова, і розмова була хорошою, конструктивною. Наші команди встигли обговорити багато деталей. Наша позиція абсолютно чітка. Україна прагне миру від першої секунди війни. І ми хочемо зробити все, щоб мир був досягнутий якнайшвидше і надійно, так, щоб війни більше не було. Нашою українською пропозицією на цю зустріч з американцями було 3 речі. Це тиша в небі, ракети, бомби, далекобійні, дрони і тиша на морі. І реальні заходи встановлення довіри до всієї цієї ситуації, в якій триває дипломатія. Тобто, передусім, це звільнення полонених, наших військових та цивільних, і повернення українських дітей, які були вивезені в Росію. Американська сторона розуміє наші аргументи, сприймає наші пропозиції, і я хочу подякувати президенту Трампу за конструктивність у розмови наших команд. І сьогодні в розмові була пропозиція саме американської сторони зробити перший крок одразу далі. І на 30 днів спробувати встановити повне припинення вогню. Не тільки щодо ракет, дронів і бомб, не тільки у Чорному морі, а також по всій лінії фронту. Україна сприймає цю пропозицію. Ми вважаємо це позитивним. Ми готові зробити такий крок. Сполучені Штати Америки мають переконати Росію зробити це. Тобто ми погоджуємось, і якщо русські погодяться, в той самий момент тиша запрацює. Важливим елементом розмови сьогодні є готовність Америки відновити оборонну допомогу Україні. Також допомогу розвідданими. Коли домовленості запрацюють, то протягом цих 30 днів тиші ми можемо встигнути підготувати з партнерами на рівні робочих документів всі аспекти для надійності миру і тривалого гарантування безпеки. Україна готова до миру, свою готовність припинити війну чи продовжувати війну повинні показати в Росії. Настав час для повної правди. Дякую всім нашим дипломатам і команді, яка сьогодні в Саудівській Аравії. Дякую всім, хто допомагає Україні. Дякую кожному і кожній, хто б'ється і працює заради нашої держави і людей. Обов'язково зберігаємо незалежність, обов'язково захищаємо життя наших людей. Обов'язково дякуємо всім, хто допомагає Україні триматись і розвиватись попри все. Має бути достойний мир. Слава Україні!
Героям слава. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on this very day of the war, 1112. I hate to tell you all this, I was looking forward to this, but we missed being on air for day 1111, where all of the numbers in the day would have been ones. I was very misfortunate to not be here on that day. It was a Monday. We had it off. But beyond that, though, it is time for us to move on into that second segment. Crazily enough, not really behind schedule all too much. We're pretty much on time nearly. But I do have to thank all of y'all so much for being here so far, and I hope y'all stick around. This question segment is a very fun segment. We talk about all kinds of things. Fun things, not so much fun things. Hood reviews, cars, trains, a lot of trains, planes, anything, Jack. What are you talking about? Hills of Xi Jinping. But beyond that, I hope that y'all are looking forward to this segment as much as I am, because I absolutely love this segment. I adore it. But Matthew, I understand that we got another poll here. We got another poll about that cargo ship. And what are people thinking about it, Matthew? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So entering our last question segment here, we do have one more poll to get to. And the question says, today, Russia fired a missile at a foreign cargo ship leaving Odessa, killing 4 of the crew. And is anybody going to respond to this attack? So 34% said yes, somebody is going to respond to it, while 32% said it's probably going to be strongly worded statements only. And 26% said no, it will be completely ignored. And unfortunately on this one, I think it's going to be limited to probably being only strongly worded statements, or it's going to be completely ignored. Right now, NATO is in a bit of a scramble. They're really not in any position to respond to anything right now. They're trying to figure out basically where the alliance stands. And outside of that, Ukraine is basically going to have to keep fighting the war, and that's the way they can respond to it. But outside of that, I think it's going to be ignored by the 25% I would agree with. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that sadly, based off of the precedent that's been laid out by vessels getting attacked in the past and crew members being killed, this will most likely be ignored. Usually those would create a major diplomatic incident, but so far in the conflict in Ukraine over the past 3 years, it's never really created any kind of a major diplomatic response. So with that, I hope that addresses that somewhat well, at least in my opinion. And with that, it's time for us to get on into them questions. What do we got, Matthew? What do we got?
Also, let's see here. Someone said, who would the ship belong to? Wasn't it like Rhodesia or something? It's Barbados, my bad. Not Rhodesia. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Yeah, Barbados. It was a Barbados flagged cargo ship. So it was a foreign flagged ship. It wasn't Ukrainian. So that was the big distinction on this one. But no, it was not. What did I say? Rhodesia or something? I don't even know what the hell I said that.
Like, Rhodesia doesn't even exist anymore, man. It's like, man, shit, where did that cargo ship come from? Didn't that thing come from damn Siam or something like that? Didn't that thing come from? No, let's see. What's another country that doesn't exist? Didn't that damn thing come from the Soviet Union? It's like, it's a man.
Oh yeah, freshly sailing out of the Soviet Union and Rhodesia. It may go to Wakanda next.
Man, honestly, man, that's something right there, man. That honestly, you could pass that by that one guy that talks like this about the veterans. Dude, you could pass that by him any day. He'd believe it. He'd be like, shit, I bet you did come from Rhodesia. And what's his name? And where's the boss? And all that kind of thing. Like, dude, you like honestly, man, we gotta see about getting invited on his show so that way we can just say things that aren't even true. He'll probably just take him at face value. But anyways, with that, Matthew, what do we got? What do we got, champ? What do we got? Hit me with it. Hit me with it.
All right, so jumping back into our super chat questions, our first one here is going to be the largest super chat of the night, which goes to Walter A. Lakota Jr., of all people, the LSA Bosun, who puts in a $100 donation. And thank you very much, Walter, for that support, and we appreciate it very much. That's very generous of you. And he said, aloha, Enforcer Matt, and LSA from OG Ellison Bosun. He said the Maritime incident off the east coast of England is just that, a plain, simple maritime incident, and the investigation is going to look at caller regs 75, 78, Rule 2 and 30. He's pulling out the rule book on us, and he said, and STC W95. And also take care and enjoy the stream.
Thank you so much for the support, Walter E. Lakota. And I would have to say, I think it was a maritime accident. Although that ship was like at ramming speed, it was like ramming speed, and then ran like right into the like the oiler. But beyond that, I would say it was most likely a maritime accident. I would bet you that no one was even at the helm, and they just had the thing largely on cruise control, I suppose. And they just ran headlong into it, and that was what happened. But one thing that is crazy though is seeing the video that came out from it. Let me go see if I can find that again, because that was wild looking. Honestly.
Also, by the way, I heard somebody got arrested. I don't have the details right in front of me right now, but I heard somebody got arrested in connection to it. But I'm not sure which party it was or which person.
Let me see here if I can find that video, because it was wild looking with like the haze over the North Sea and the kind of like choppy waves that were out there. It was a really interesting sight. So let me see if I can find this thing. Let's see here. Well, I should be finding it soon. Yeah, here we go. Hey, a little cooking here. But here it was. I'm not gonna lie, man. Considering that this happened near to East Yorkshire, I'm honestly surprised that there weren't a whole bunch of people out there on the coastline going, "Oh my goodness! Quick, loot it!" You know, because that's what the British have always. That's always what the British have done with shipwrecks. Some people are gonna be like, "Don't do this on Britain." Like, listen, historically, if anything washed ashore on Britain, it was finders keepers. So a whole ship could run aground, and you could go out there and loot it all day and night. Especially if the crew abandoned the vessel, then it was just it was really just salvage rights at that point. Anyone could go out there and loot it. So. Like, honestly, I'm really surprised that, like, British, like, ancestral genetics didn't kick in when they saw that happen. We're like, quick, start looting, you know, because, like, honestly, that's historically what would happen. But beyond that, really wild to see. But I do thank you so much for sharing that, because I was kind of thinking that too. Although everyone always wants to think there's something deeper to everything, I was largely thinking that it probably was the case with that. But still, I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, Walter E. Lakota, who threw in massive support like that, we wouldn't be able to have a literally on-the-call maritime expert, a merchant mariner, here with us to be able to answer some of our most pressing questions in terms of what's going on out there in the world of the open seas, I suppose. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And hey, you know, speaking of East Yorkshire, which is an interesting place in its own, have you ever heard of the city of York? Do y'all know anything about Stamford Bridge? Do y'all know anything about York though? Like really? Like, do y'all know about York?
This is the original York before it became New York.
Honestly, Old York is really cool. Like, we've been here, we've seen it. Old York is cool. Let me show y'all. So let me see here if I can get a good picture for y'all. Yeah, here we go. Look at that.
That is nice. I like that.
Yeah, that's really cool. And look at that.
That is nice too. Look at that. Their cars have like headlights and also taillights that just go on for ages.
Man, that's just how they do it in Britain, you know. Their cars are very long. And look at that, and look at this. And I think that's an old part of the city wall. I think that was like one of the city gates at some point. But the city is actually still surrounded by a wall, which is also really cool as well, because you can see it in some places. Let me see here. Let's see. This is off-placed. We've walked across this bridge before. What are they doing? Wait a minute, dude. Wait a minute. Did they get rid of the bridge?
Wait a minute. I remember this place over there. We parked over there in a parking shed or something, and there was a bridge that we walked across.
No way. That was the bridge. They're tearing it down.
What the hell are they doing that for?
I don't know. We walked across this bridge right there. They're tearing it down. They're tearing it down. They're tearing down our bridge, our beautiful bridge. It was a great bridge. I remember that bridge. I walked across that bridge while I was there. I said, wow, what a beautiful bridge. But yeah, look at that. Look at that. There's the bridge right there. So now they've paved a ground level road and they're tearing down the bridge. They need
That's
to bring
crazy.
back the bridge. They need to make it bigger and better than ever. We're going to have so many bridges, you're going to get tired of bridges. But that's so
What were
sad.
we looking at when we went here? Because we got out somewhere around here to go to something.
Well, we got out, I think, to go to the railway station and then across the way to the National Railway Museum, which was one hell of a sight. Oh, yeah, we had to walk under it. Remember? We walked under the
Oh
station.
yeah, that's right, that's right. We parked
Yeah.
in like some like shed thing, then walked all the way over there to that museum. I forgot.
Yeah, we parked in a parking deck, and we walked past here. There was some sort of a crazy advertisement on the wall. You remember that? Like, it was like a banner for something, and we were laughing at it the whole time. I
I think
forgot
so.
what it was. It was on this building, I think, right there.
I
But
think it was like some fitness advertisement or something.
but yeah, look at that, dude. Look at that. Like, we walked across this bridge thing right here. We walked up this and then around, and it's gone. It's gone now entirely. That's just wild. How the world changes, how the world changes. But I was going to get on that bridge because the last time we ever looked at York on the stream, the bridge was still there on satellite view, and it's still there right there. But there are these little arches in the city wall. Oh, well, great. Wait a minute, are they... What? Oh, dude, this is even further on in progress. They've, like, gotten completely rid of everything. What a shame. What a great shame. Let me see if I can get over here, though. So anyways, there's these little arches here in the walls. That was for the original York Railway Station because it actually was a part of this building right here. That's actually the original train station, and I'll show you all the front of it. So this was the original station. It's now the Grand Hotel. But you can still see the crest, I think, of the Northeastern Railway, which had their railway station in York. But later on, when the railways became larger and they wanted continuous access and they didn't want York to be a terminus, they then built the larger one that still exists to this day out here, I think in like the 1880s. So a little bit of a cool fact, but the city wall still surrounds the entirety of the inner area of York. And they also have this really cool place called the Shambles, which is largely still medieval from the 14th century. Most of it is, and it's just really impressive to go see because it's all original buildings for the large part. I don't think the inner part of York, I don't really think York was actually bombed all too much during the Blitz, so most of the buildings survived inside of the actual city of York, while other places that were really cool didn't really fare so well during World War II, and a lot of their original historic buildings actually ended up getting destroyed during the Blitz. York Minster wasn't one of them, though. And York Minster is actually, I believe, the largest cathedral in Northeastern Europe in terms of internal size and volume. It's bigger than Notre Dame. It's bigger than, I believe, actually, I think St. Paul's might be fairly comparable in size, maybe even a little bit larger. So I might be incorrect on that. I think it's the second largest cathedral in Europe. Actually, no, I'd be wrong. I think it's the largest cathedral in Northeastern Europe. But the largest cathedral in all of Europe would actually be the Vatican, well, the Basilica at the Vatican. That is the largest cathedral in all of Europe. But anyways, moving on from that, still very interesting place. But I do thank you so much for the massive support and sharing that information with us, Walter Lakota, about that crush, so that way we can know a little bit more about it. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to none other than Activista, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you, Activista, as well, for that $50 support and being a longtime channel legend as well, and we appreciate it very much. And Activista said, I'm reminded by the efficacy of current financial protests that it's equally important to support organizations I do believe in, like you guys, and Viva Coffee.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Activista, and helping this channel to keep on running. People have tried to take us down. People have tried to say that they hate us because we're Americans and they don't want to support our channel. And I gotta thank you, Activista, for supporting it and helping it to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. It really is something, though. Some people have vowed to never support us again and have sworn to hate us now because we're Americans. And I really don't get that because it's like, for some of these folks, like Canadians and Europeans and things, we've always been looking out for everyone's interests collectively. And now they want to act like the actions of the president are our actions and we're to blame for them when we're not. But I do thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Activista, and continuing to enjoy this channel and help it to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. We wouldn't be able to keep it rolling every day. And I thank you massively for that, because it really is an amazing thing to know that so many people continue to enjoy this channel and enjoy it enough that they'll go out of their way to do something that they don't have to, like you did, which is to support it. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is going to go to Fleos, who just threw in a $100 donation, by the way. That just came in, their first ever super chat on the channel. And thank you very much, Fleos, for that support. Very generous of you for the first one. That's wild. But Fleos said, thanks for hefty portions of news, accompanied with grade A quality analysis, served with sides of deep dives and rabbit holes, garnished with homegrown improv, topped with multilingual flavors like Scooby-Dooing. Also, always expanding the palette of this non-mil-spec city dude.
Hey, and thank you so much for the massive support, Fleos, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I gotta say, thank you for your first super chat ever. That's a huge one, mind you, for your first one. And I gotta thank you massively for that. And I also gotta thank you for the kind words. I really try and make sure that our analysis is good. And people just don't get it. Like, I don't know what it is these days, because I just try and make sure their analysis is fair. And like, it blows my mind with it. I thank you for appreciating that. But nowadays, it really just shows through more than ever why modern media is the way it is because people don't really want it to be like this channel. Like, I'm not trying to be like, I'm not like other dudes. Like really at the end of the day, I'm like everyone else. But as far as the analysis goes in this channel, it really is on its own in that kind of a degree, because if you go to Fox News, you're going to get right-leaning prospects. If you go to CNN, you're going to get left-leaning. And if you go to any YouTube channel, they're going to be politically leaning one way or the other. And we try not to do that on this channel, but people have hardwired themselves, because I guess they're just mentally lazy most of the time, not like you or anyone else who's here. A lot of them hardwire themselves to be mentally lazy. So if you're of the right wing, everything the right wing does is perfect, and the left wing are devils. And if you're in the left wing, everything the left wing does is perfect, and then the other side's devils. And you can't ever like disagree with anything that they do or say that there's a better alternative. You just have to go with the grain. And so when we are on this channel and we give our analysis, like, you know, for the past week or two, we have been saying that we're not a big fan of what the president's doing in foreign policy. And then people want to say, oh, you know, look, he's a liberal. And then tonight, like, we do what we did tonight and be like, well, you know, that isn't really that bad. And then people want to come in the chat, oh, come on, you're like some Republican or something. It's like, no, it's like, I'm just trying to be analyzing this neutrally. You know, it's like sometimes these people make decent actions. Sometimes they don't. But we always try and make sure that the analysis is fair. You know, I'm not going to go out of my way to just go on a witch hunt against someone and say that everything they do is terrible. And I thank you for really understanding that a lot, Fleos, and not only that, appreciating it enough to support it massively and help us to keep this thing running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to do this. Like, that's kind of the crazy thing. If we were beholden to the masses out there, we would have to pick the right or the left and stick with it. And we wouldn't be able to sit there and really do what we do, which is just analyze things and say whether it's good or not, or whether it's going to benefit all of us in the end, or bring us any kind of progress or prosperity or anything like that. Like, you know, like for example, like, just to bring this up to some, because I feel like people may have a bit of a short-term memory on this, we criticized the last president, like, just to kind of like give the name as the example. We criticized Biden a pretty good deal. I mean, like, it wasn't really like a hidden thing. We've criticized Trump a good bit, yes, and we have criticized Biden a great deal. I always said that he was incredibly soft-handed on Iran, and I think that was an incredibly horrendous thing. And I also thought that he certainly wasn't doing enough to help out Taiwan, and he was dragging his feet with Ukraine support. You know, like, we've gone, like, and also the Chinese balloon thing was just a huge thing, how that could not even be brought to the president for some reason, and then when it was brought to the president, the amount of inaction that followed for a good bit. You know, we criticized the last president a good deal. And back then, there wasn't really that much pushback against it. But now that we've gotten into also criticizing some foreign policy actions or national security actions of the current president, then people want to, really get incredibly vehement and violent, about the same kind of analysis that we've been doing for 3 years. But I do thank you so much for the support and really understanding and appreciating where we come from here. And also another thing that I have to say, thank you so much for enjoying the deep dives and rabbit holes. I hope that people enjoy them. I'm kind of like that. I just go ranting on all kinds of things. I bore people to sleep sometimes doing that, but I'm very glad to know that you enjoy it, and a lot of people do, because sometimes I'll drive Matthew crazy, like on trains. Like Matthew's told me in the background, he's like, "Good God, man, stop talking about trains." I'm like, "I'm sorry, man, I'm sorry. It's just something I'm
telling you,
interested
man. I just can't take so much
take
strain.
it
I can only take so
anymore.
much strain. I heard about a chopper. I heard about an ST-90. I heard about an SD-80. I said, I don't know what it is. I don't even know. It's not my thing.
He said, "Help me, help me!" Like, man, you're like Kirk in that Star Trek episode where you got that guy with the piano wire, where he was like, "Help, help me!" And then the guy came running in, and he like strangled him with the piano wire.
Spock, help me, Spock.
Man, he's calling out for help. A Vulcan doesn't call out for help. Spock, help me, Spock. It's like the Klingon guy or whatever. But beyond that, I do thank you massively for enjoying the rabbit holes. Thank the Lord you do. I'm always so worried that people do not. And also, improv is the name of the game on this show. Everything we do is improv for the large part. There is never a pre-prepared script. Everything is done on the fly live, which also makes question segments like these a bit of a wild card, because we could have any kind of question thrown in. I generally have to have enough knowledge to answer most everything. Very seldom do I try and say that I declare ignorance on anything. So I've got to say, thank you so much for enjoying the improv. Like, and I hope the jokes are funny, because like I don't sit before the show. Like, we don't have writers that come up with our jokes because we don't have any writers, and I also don't sit before the show and really think up many jokes. I'm kind of just having to try and come up with jokes on the spot. So I'm praying to the Lord that they're funny, because it's not really like I'm like a comedian by trade and kind of like come up with my own routines or minutes. And also, thank you so much for enjoying the kind of broadness that we give to this and really trying to be as neutral as possible. Whether we get flamed by people regardless these days. So, I'm just going to stick to what we've always done. If something's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. We'll call it for what it is. It doesn't matter who they are or what they are politically. We'll just call it for what it is. And I got to thank you massively for appreciating that and supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, Fleos, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it rolling. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, y'all know what's up. Y'all know what's up. We are on to the poll. We're not on to the next one. We're on to a poll. Matthew, what do we got here? What do we got?
So this poll right here is about food. It says, which sounds most appetizing? Not more appetizing, but most appetizing. 48% said something else. Come on, man. 24% said McDonald's quarter pounder, while 15% said Chipotle Cornelius bowl with guac, and 13% said Whataburger Monterey Melt. Honestly, these are things that I eat, so I put them on the poll. So I'll be honest with you. The McDonald's quarter pounder has been growing on me. It's not exactly the most fascinating culinary thing in the world. It's not something like, like a chef like Danny would whip up or something like that. But it is good for something fast. I do like it. And it is probably the cheapest thing you can buy fast food-wise these days. Probably not the healthiest, I'll be honest. But, honestly, I have a high metabolism, so I really don't have to worry about it too much. But the Whataburger is pretty good too, but you can get 2 quarter pounders for the cost of 1 Whataburger these days. So I would say yes. And also, Chipotle, I don't want to test my luck with that again, because the last time the luck was no good. But I'm with the 24%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, Matthew, are you hungry?
Honestly, I'm starving to death.
Really? The shepherd's pie didn't hold you over?
No, it didn't actually. It didn't at all.
What? Dude, that held me over. Wow. Like, honestly, I'm not even really hungry right now. But if I had to pick one of those, I'm not going to lie, folks. I don't know why I dissed on McDonald's most of my life. McDonald's is actually pretty good. Like, it's not like health food, obviously, but it's not bad either for fast food, and it's really cheap. Like, we've been getting McDonald's a good bit lately, because, we're on a shoestring budget. I'm just kidding. But we've been trying to save cost on eating. So we've been getting McDonald's lately. And for some reason, I always remember that the Filet-O-Fish tasted like garbage. And I had a Filet-O-Fish And it actually was really good. I was like really shocked with how good a filet of fish was, or a quarter pounder with cheese, because that's also something that we've been getting a lot. But yeah, I mean, like honestly, if I had to pick out of those, I would probably pick a McDonald's quarter pounder with cheese. Honestly, though, man, tonight I'm feeling like having something a little bit more like. I don't know. It just sound like a rich asshole. Artisan burger, like a
Oh,
Whataburger thing. Oh heavens, the flavor profile of this Whataburger. Heavens, you know.
I only will have a artisan burger. Only an artisan burger. I won't have anything lesser. I won't have that junior hamburger.
Man, honestly though, I would have like honestly feel like I would want a Whataburger tonight. Not gonna lie, just being straight up. Because like
I just want anything. I'll literally eat anything.
man, I'm telling you, man, we might be getting around to that here soon. The quicker we get off this show, folks, the quicker we're getting to eat. But I'm not going to rush to get to the end of the show. By the way,
No,
folks.
don't
we'll,
rush.
We'll sit here and enjoy our time. And of course, McDonald's and Whataburger are open 24/7, so it's not like we're in a rush or anything. So with that, I do thank you all for answering that. I would actually have to say tonight I'm in the 13% with the Whataburger, but usually I would be within the the 24% for the McDonald's quarter pounder with cheese. They're not bad. But anyways, with that, I hope that does. Catty Cat said, "I dare you to try surströmming." I'm sorry, I do not try war crimes as food. Like, I'm sorry, like that is a violation of the Geneva Convention, and I wouldn't touch it for those reasons. I'm a moralistic person. Also, Jack Jelly said, "Filet mignon," or man, remember that? Okay, I got to tell you all about this. Every time I see the word filet mignon, I think of filet mignon. Because there was this guy who was a recruiter. He came to our high school, and he was a recruiter for the army. I think if I'm getting that right, man. He was like, "Hey," he was trying to act really cool. He was like, "Hey, all you people out there, y'all probably got no prospects of futures or anything like that. You're probably broke as shit." It's like, well, yeah, we're high schoolers. And then he's like, if you get in the army, you get paid enough that you can go get filet mignons every weekend. And I was like, filet mignons?
Yeah, Mary said that.
Yeah, remember
Filet
that? He
mignon.
said filet mignons. He said it just deadpan. He thought that's how it's pronounced. It's like, okay, I know that you're not buying them because you don't even know how to pronounce them. It's like a filet mignon. Like, filet mignons are pretty good. But it's like, if you don't know how to pronounce them, you're clearly not eating them. New York strips are good, by the way. Honestly, I think that all cuts of meat are great. I judge them all fairly. I like anything pork, beef, chicken. I mean, I'll eat any of it. It's very good, especially when cooked well. But man, Matthew can do some magic with some beef or pork in a taco. Like those things turn out amazing every time. Like with the seasoning and the sauce and the flavoring and all that. Very, very good. But
I just know how to whip up a good taco, honestly. Like I can whip up pretty much anything. I haven't done this, but I can also whip up a fish taco too, which is pretty good. The southwestern style pork tacos, they're busting, good, tasty, chipotle mayo and all that good stuff. I'm telling you what, I like a good like flavorful taco. That's a good thing, like a proper one, not like Taco Bell junk. I'm talking about a proper one.
man, I'll be honest with you, man. I would say that like the tacos that you cook are just they're fire. Like y'all have to try them one day. They're incredibly good. Man, like I'm not even kidding about that. They are actually really good. He could open up a restaurant with those things, and it would work well. But it also Lost Six Shadows 666. Now I'm hungry. Now you know how we feel. I'm hungry now. Like I'm getting hungry talking about it. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right. So our next one here also said someone said what type of shell? Just a normal tortilla shell. You throw them in a like a paper towel that's damp, and you throw them in the microwave so they get slightly warm, and then you can shape the tortilla shell and they kind of hold their shape generally, so it turns into a normal taco. So that's one trick. But yeah, a little bit of olive oil in a pan, sizzle up some pork, throw in some seasoning, throw in a little bit of that marinade on it, tasting real good, real southwestern flavor, a little Tex-Mex. They're really tasty. But anyways, jumping on to our next one here. This one goes to Nightmare Before Christmas, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Nightmare Before Christmas, for that support. They said Poland helped Britain during World War II with massive help in the air battle of Britain. And with the ship Perun, who being a destroyer, still fought the Bismarck alone after the sinking of the Hood. And thank you, LSA, and good news today, hopefully.
Hey, and thank you so much for your support. And the Polish were there, and they did use the Piorin. Look at that. That's the destroyer right there. I think actually, yeah, it was operated by the Polish Navy, but it was let's see, ordered by the Royal Navy in 1939, and it was loaned to the Poles in 1940 while still under construction. So this wasn't exactly like a Polish, because I was about to say that looks like a tribal class, and it's an in class, a little bit close to being a tribal class, though, in terms of how it looks, but beyond that, I do thank you for the support, and it is really cool to know how the Poles were there. Really, Britain was trying to help out Poland, and Poland ended up having to pretty much just fight as a part of the British armed forces for the remainder of the war, because, you know, Poland ceased to exist by the end of 1939, well, really by the beginning of 1940, but beyond that, it was an interesting time for sure, especially for the Polish, and I don't think they'll ever really forget that, you know, like how that went, but anyways, oh, look, we can see that they returned after the Bismarck was sunk, because they were out there trying to sink the Bismarck. There was also another ship out there that was trying to sink the Bismarck, which is one of my, like, curiosities, I guess you could call it. This thing, which is called the Rodney, well, the HMS Rodney.
I'm telling you, you get no respect out here on the ocean.
Oh, man, I'm telling you. Oh, man, I fired my guns and everyone's eyeballs went red. Oh, man, I'm telling you. I get no respect around here. Oh, man. Oh, man, I told my wife I was going out to sea for 6 weeks. I came back and she had 6 men with her. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Oh, man, it was terrible, real terrible. Oh, man, and she's not a great wife either. Oh, man, I asked her to cook her up something. Oh, man, she cooked my ass. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Beyond that, the HMS Rodney was a really interesting vessel because it had 9 16-inch main guns. You can actually see them putting them in the turret right there. But what was wild about the Rodney is that the guns were a little bit too powerful for the hull of the vessel. They fired them at the Bismarck, I think, once, and it actually cracked some pretty important structural elements in the hull, and they had to bring the ship back to port and put it into refit for months from firing the main guns because they were that powerful for the hull of the vessel. It is really a wild kind of a ship, but there was one that was even more wild that the British had for a while. I can't really remember the name of it, but it had like 6 turrets, and like they only had 12-inch guns in the thing. It was made for the Brazilians, and then they just requisitioned it for World War I, like when it was still being built, and so it was whack. It was a wild thing. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address it well, and I think it wants to give her support and help with this channel to keep it running, and hopefully everything with Ukraine turns out good. We always try and stay a little bit optimistic with it, you know. We'd like to look on the bright side of things. We wouldn't like to be like Hot Dog Man going, oh man, it's finally over for them, as he's like still like middling out at nothing and losing for good. Like, we always try and be a bit of an optimist. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on. Oh, yeah, or heroic fluffiness. You are right. Like, that 30mm Gatling gun in the bottom of the MiG-27, they'd fire it and it ripped the plane apart. I mean, it's all about Soviet engineering at its finest. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Rick Gullingen, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Rick, for that support. And we appreciate that. He said, greetings from BC, Canada. And also, huge thanks to you, Rick, because you are from Canada. I'll be honest with you, we've gotten a lot of flack, and kind of understandably so, but also at the same time, we can't be held responsible for the actions of the government. I mean, we're just private citizens, but a lot of Canadians have decided to jump ship off the channel because they don't like the current actions of the government. So thank you very much, Rick, for still supporting the channel as a Canadian, and we appreciate that. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you so much for supporting the channel as well. It's good to know that we have folks in the Lee Spring Army who believe in the ideals of the Lee Spring Army. Those futures untold and futures unknown, and people are still going to stand bold as the battles rage soundly whirl. You know what? Those are some great lyrics right there. Kind of called it in the future what would happen. For some reason, somehow, you kind of applied the lyrics into the present day. But nevertheless, it's good to know that folks like you stand resolute with the Lee Spring Army still to this day. And I got to thank you once again for the support all the way from British Columbia in Canada. I don't know what part of British Columbia you're from, but I'd assume you're from Vancouver, because Vancouver is a pretty big city down here in British Columbia. Take a gander at it. Honestly, I want to go to Vancouver, Canada one day. It's a really neat place. And I would just love to see it. The closest we ever got was Seattle, down here. And Seattle was really cool. Like, I'm going to say it's one of the coolest cities I've ever been to, in my opinion. But one day I want to get up there to Vancouver, because you also have all of these nice mountains, like in the Garibaldi Park. And look at that. I mean, that's just right outside of the city.
That's nice right there. Like, honestly, like I would say Seattle's close enough for me.
Man, Seattle is close enough for us all. We can all have a little bit of Canada. Not that way, though. like not that way. We're not trying to insinuate that. But still, it's a beautiful
Are we going to
place.
have it?
Nah, it's Canada's. They're good. But still, what a beautiful place. What a beautiful country. And also, you just got, like, Banff. You got Banff. We go to Banff and we see unicorn. Like, you got that really nice. Look at that.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, look at that. That's nice right there. I would like to just cut all those trees down and build a house, like a neighborhood right there in the middle of it. Just cut all the trees.
man, this would be a perfect place for a Dollar General.
It would be. Like, could you imagine the money you could get off all that wood right there? I say clear cut the whole Banff.
Dude, I say
Oh, those elks. Look at those elks, man. Those horns would go for big bucks on the market.
we could strip them naked of all of their fur, go sell it on the open market, take the horns, we'll use it to prod at Putin when he refuses the ceasefire agreement. Very sad. This is a perfect place for a vape shop.
Oh, I got a new idea. Banff spring water with a big T on it. I say siphon the water out of this lake, make it bone dry, make some dollars.
We're going to call it golden water. It's going to be the best water that you've ever had. It's going to be absolutely incredible. Hey, I got to say right here that this would be the perfect place, this spot right here, for a giant Walmart. We're going to fill in the lake, turn it into a giant parking lot, and then put the Walmart at the end of it. Very nice.
Better yet, I got a new one. Bottle the air and sell it too. Put a big T on it.
Well, after we get done cutting down all of the trees, there's going to be a lack of oxygen. It's going to start impairing the thinking abilities. We're going to have great oxygen. We're going to have to take Canada's oxygen and sell it in America. And also, I've got another thing that I'd like to say. Another thing. We're going to call this Elon Point because it's really jagged and attempts to be edgy. But it doesn't really look like it really is edgy. It looks kind of soft. But beyond that, not that bad, not that bad. Also, this would be that little bridge over there. That'd be a perfect spot to hide your Tesla because people are shitting on Teslas. They are keying them, throwing stuff on them, egging them. I've decided that we are going to be summarily executing anyone who touches a Tesla. It's just how it is. Just take it for what it is. Yeah, believe me, we're going to pass an executive order in 2 years' time. We're going to make it mandatory for everyone to buy one Tesla. Man. You will have to buy one Tesla.
Could you imagine also, like, those rocks have great potential as well, these big rocks, it's computer. You can literally just go and chisel like a piece of rock off. Those would make great countertops. Like, just take the whole mountain down, blast it, great countertops, sell them in Lowe's around the country.
I got an even better idea. I got a better idea than you could ever come up with. Who are you with? You are with nobody. Nobody knows who you are. I got a great idea. This would be the perfect place to level these mountains and build a nuclear power plant so that way we can fuel our artificial intelligence, so that way we can put everyone out of a job. I think that would be a beautiful thing to put right there where that rock slide is. Very great spot. Plenty of water to work with. Lots of water. I watched this movie, Waterworld. It was a crazy movie. But beyond that, I always thought, why not cover the world in water? It'd be great. People are always going to be drinking.
Yeah.
Drink the water.
I've just never understood, really, like in the United States, we have so much like beautiful forests, like the national parks and stuff like that. I've always wondered, as just a citizen, why are we not clear cutting all that? Like, I've always wondered, why are we not clear cutting like Yosemite, Yellowstone? Because that's just like so many trees. Like, we could be making so much cash from that. Why not just clear cut it?
Well, I got to tell you something. To be entirely honest with you, Matthew, the problem is those damn globalists. They won't let us cut down our trees. We're going to cut down all of the trees. There's going to be none left. No trees at all. You're going to go around. You're going to see nothing but stumps. And people are going to go, please stop letting us see stumps. And I'm going to go, no, you're going to keep seeing stumps. You're going to see so many stumps. You're going to get tired of stumps. You're going to get stumped where all the trees went. You see what I did right there? I did a little pun. And also, trees have green leaves, and that kind of looks like money, and I want all of them. So,
also, by the way, to make it clear, I'm not being serious. I'm not actually advocating to cut down Yosemite or the other ones. That's definitely not my perspective at all. I would say that, the national parks are something that we should be proud of as Americans because it's an area of natural beauty. And unfortunately, in my opinion, I'm not dogging on the USA because I love the country, but there's not a whole bunch of areas of just natural beauty in the country. I think, like for example, countries like Britain, they're at a bit of an advantage because they have a little bit more areas of natural beauty than we do. America really doesn't. So our national parks are even more important than ever because of that fact. It gives us somewhere to go to enjoy nature and not just a clear cut, basically metropolis hell, pretty much everywhere else. So no, we shouldn't clear cut it. We should leave that there for the enjoyment of the people since we, pay taxes to maintain them.
I would say that the national park system is the biggest waste of money that has ever existed in this country. Think about it. We pay people to watch wilderness that is wild. There's no maintenance involved in that. But the thing is that is the best waste of money that I think the U.S. government has ever made in its entire history, is preserving areas of natural beauty for all generations now and well into the future to see in its raw natural form. Like, you cannot find places like Yellowstone that are untouched and untapped really throughout the entirety of the United States. And it really is amazing to think that we maintain these giant and vast tracts of wilderness, largely just so that way people can come through and see these areas and how beautiful they are and how great they are. I mean, it's really an impressive thing when you think about it. And I say that the national park system is a great thing. And also, I largely have to say that forestry is also a wildly important thing. The U.S. Forestry Service was created to largely ensure that there were decent forestry practices being implemented in the country. And while some people may say, don't be a tree hugger, and I'm not exactly, to be honest with y'all, a tree hugger per se, I certainly do believe pollution is a very bad thing. I mean, historically, pollution's always been a major concern. But at the same time, you can't go around clear cutting everything. It's like you can of course harvest timber, but it's got to be in a sustainable way where you're not just wiping out all of the trees and then the topsoil washes away and then we end up like North Korea. You can't do something like that because that can end up devastating in the long run. But still, I say that the national parks are an amazing thing. It's a complete waste of tax dollars when you really think about it, because we really don't get anything back from them that's worth any money. But the government isn't always supposed to be doing something with the idea of making it a business investment. The government is kind of there at the end of the day to waste money in some rights, and this is sure as hell worth the waste of money that we get out of it. Look at this. Look at this up here. Like the White River National Forest. Look at that. I mean, it's really just crazy what all this stuff looks like. Look at that. I mean, it's beautiful out there.
That's very nice. I like it. I like areas of just like being kept natural.
Yeah, look at that. I mean, that's honestly just really cool looking at. It looks like a crappy road. It's like, wow, look at that. That's gorgeous out there, But let me see, I wonder, what does the Bankhead National Forest look like? Because this is actually the only area of virgin forest in Alabama that was never cut down. So what does that look like?
Alabama forest just doesn't hit right for some reason. Like every time I look at it, like there's areas in it that are beautiful, like the waterfall and things like that. But the whole thing, it kind of looks like it's dry or something. Like I don't know how to place it.
Crazily enough, you wouldn't believe this, Matthew. Alabama is the wettest state in the country. It has more water per square mile than every other state, I think, but Washington State.
Are you sure that Florida's not?
Yeah, I think we actually beat pretty much everyone out. I think there's maybe I think there might be a state or two that has more water than us, but Alabama has, I think, the largest amount of river systems within its state borders than any other state. It's actually wild. Like, I remember reading about it in some ecology class sort of a thing in college. And they were like, yeah, Alabama's just wild, like with animal diversity. Like, we have more animal species in Alabama than any other state in the United States.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But I guess because we grew up here and we've seen it so much, it's not really that impressive. Oh, look, a corgi! Oh, look, it's a corgi!
A corgi?
Look, it's a
what
corgi!
In the world? That's crazy. A corgi out there? You better be careful playing that. You don't know what they're talking about.
Oh, I muted it. But look, it's a little corgi. Oh,
that's crazy.
Tricolor corgi. Very cute. Toasted corgi.
I'll be honest with you, I like the orange corgis the best because that looks like a mix between some other dog and a corgi. I can't really tell.
Yeah, kinda. But honestly, man, the whole southeast kind of looks like this. Like, if you go up to the Nantahala National Forest, it looks the same for the large part.
Oh, no. That's much different. Like, that's freaking worlds different. Look at those mountains.
Whoa. Look at that mountain. You know what? Let's go to another national forest in northern Alabama, like here. let's take a gander at this. What does this look like? That water's very clear.
It's just, I don't know what it is. It's like, it's got the same look. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, it has the same look even here. I thought that was a snake for a minute right there in that frog photo right there. I was like, what was that, a copperhead or something? But, no, man, like, every like, this place even has the same look to it as well. It's just like, until you hit, like, Tennessee or Kentucky, it just doesn't get really nice looking.
So what you're saying is that you don't really like the Appalachian foothills. You like the actual Appalachians.
Yeah, basically so, yeah.
Yeah, I could see that because, like, really honestly, these pictures aren't as great as Nantahala. Like, I was trying to make a comparison there, and then I kind of, like, ate my own foot immediately. But what about this Pisgah National Forest? I've never looked. Oh, wow, look at that.
Yeah, see, that's actually beautiful, actually. That's actually nice. It's still not really my thing, but it's much more beautiful than what Alabama has got going.
Man, honestly, though, that is really nice.
Yeah, it's nice. I personally like Yosemite and Yellowstone, like that type of look, but that's just like a whole different thing, obviously on the different side of the country. But for this side of the country, I like what we're looking at here.
Where is the Shenandoah Valley? Here we go, the Shenandoah National Park. Let's see here. Let's see here. How about that? Do you like that? Do you like Shenandoah?
Shenandoah is pretty good. It's pretty good. Like, I liked it when we drove through here too. Like, it had a good feel to it.
Yeah, it was really pretty. I really liked this place. And also liked how in the valleys there was all of the farm fields that honestly had like more of an English look to them, with like the trees dividing the property lines, than here in Alabama where it's just like, you know, like barbed wire fences or like wood fences that make the divides between the property lines. That looks really good from above. And let's see here. Let's take a gander. Let's take a little extra gander here. Man, that is just really cool. I love the Shenandoah Valley. Like it's a very nice place for sure. But man, I'm telling you honestly, man, when you think about it, America actually has a lot of really nice looking places in it. Let's see here. Let's go down to the desert because that's something that we haven't shown. The Santa Fe National Forest, not named after the railroad. The railroad was named after here. But look at that, man. That's actually really cool. And look, there it is from the... Well, you actually saw that from the plane. But let me see here if I can show you. Like, look at that.
This is like the type of scenery right here where there's some guy like walking down the road with another fella in there talking about one sip of water, one bar of gold.
Yeah. Man, honestly, man, this is the kind of scene where some damn stupid coyote is dropping an anvil from the top of that cliff onto some bird. You know, it's like it looks like that. There's a really cool place down here though, and I'm trying to think of it. And maybe it's in Arizona. But I think you'll know what I'm talking about when I bring it up, Matthew. Is that place with the really cool rock formations. It's not the Grand Canyon, but it's like, you know, it's like rock formations that protrude from the landscape instead of more so being dug into it.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. It's not ringing a bell.
I'd be dipped. I can't really think about it. Maybe it's here. Well, that's really cool. I've never seen that before.
Looks like they got sort of like scraped on the side.
Man, honestly, man, this looks like what happens when, like, the backhoe, like, puts the scoop into the ground and, like, that's what the sidewalls look like. That's pretty much what that is.
Yeah, like those clay deposits or something.
Man, now that is cool, man. That's like the Wild West, you know, like what they use in the movies to represent the Wild West. This is the kind of stuff I'm talking about right here with, like, these little rock formations that are pretty unique.
Yeah, also people were saying Moab, excuse me. What the hell? Moab.
Moab. In the book of Moab.
Moab. Let's go see Moab.
Let's go see Moab. Where's Moab? Here's Moab. Moab. Oh, wait a minute. That's where that railroad is. Okay, I love this railroad in Train Sim World. There's a railroad here, and it goes down to a potash mine, which is somewhere around here. I forgot. Yeah, there it is. Intrepid Potash. You could see the cars.
What the hell was that multicolored junk, though? You see that?
Oh, this is like some sort of like a salt farm thing.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, what the world?
Let me see if I can show it to you here on the ground. You really can't see it, but there you go. That's like the salt flats where they, you know, put out the water and it creates the salt.
Oh, that's pretty neat. I like how in Utah they've got like all these public lands you can drive across. So like that person was right there. You can just drive pretty much anywhere in Utah. Like it's all mainly public lands.
Yeah, it's all federal land, like, which is wild, man. Like, it's been federal land forever. It's probably going to remain that way. Like, the actual, like, the state of Nevada, like, the governor of Nevada only controls 20% of the actual surface area of Nevada. The rest of it, like, 80% of it is run and owned by the federal government. So the
I
state
mean,
government.
Nevada is just like a huge testing ground. Like the whole place is just like a huge testing ground. Basically, they've got the area for Area 51. For the name of the base is fleeting me right now. It's the something testing range, Tonopah, I think,
White
testing
Sands.
range. Yeah, I think it's Tonopah actually. It's like a humongous testing range. The whole of Nevada is just like nothing basically, except for Las Vegas at the bottom.
Yeah, but this is exactly what I was talking about, Matthew, right here with the interesting rock formations. This is literally it. And these are wildly cool. Like like this. Like look at that. That boulder is precariously sitting up there on top of that ledge. It's very cool to look at these rocks and formations because I always think, how in the world did like the erosion and things actually happen to create these specific kind of rock formations? Because they're very impressive and really striking. Like all of them are very unique. And very special. And I'm like, wow, that is so cool. And thank you, everyone, by the way, for saying that it was the Moab National, or the Arches National Park near Moab, because y'all were dead on the nail. But what a cool place. Like, look at that. Just goes on and on and on. Same kinds
Hey,
of
look, there's
different
people out there.
Yeah, look, there's people. Like, there's people out here. But it's just such a, well, look at that.
That's nice.
Dude,
I don't
that's
see
like,
any people in this photo.
dude, that's like Yosemite, but more so arid and desert-like.
Yeah, kind of. It kind of is.
Yeah. I would not drink that water.
Whoa. Okay.
No, man. Like, dude, you're always freaking out
I don't
over
know
it.
what I was seeing, man. I didn't know. You gotta understand. I'm seeing everything through like a very small version of your screen, so like I only see one quick glance at something. I'm like, what the hell's going on? But anyway, it was kosher. Though. It was kosher.
Whoa, yeah. but man, honestly, what a cool place. And also the town of Moab. What does that look like? Is it nice? Is it nice? Is it not? They don't have any pictures of the town. That might not be a good thing. Let's drop down at Moab and take a look at it. Oh wow, actually it's pretty nice. They got road snakes everywhere, but it actually is a pretty nice town.
Yeah, not too bad. How far away is Moab from Salt Lake City?
Oh, real far away. Like there's Moab and there's Salt Lake City all the way up there. Like maybe a 7-hour
dang, it's
drive.
like on the border of Colorado. I thought it was outside of Salt Lake City or something.
Yeah, I mean it's like practically in the middle of nowhere because it's a long ways to Denver. It's a really long ways to even Flagstaff or Albuquerque, and it's a really really long ways from Salt Lake City. So there's not really any major cities around it.
Yeah, very interesting. I don't think I'd live out that far away.
Yeah, let me see something here. There should be. Where is it? There is a railroad that actually passes around Moab. It's the Cane Creek branch line, and I'm wanting to see if I can find it because once I find it, I can actually show it to y'all. Because the overlook that they have, they actually get to look down at Moab as they're making their way around the route. And I cannot find it. Oh, how bizarre! How bizarre! Maybe it's a little bit further in. No, where's the railroad over here? Where is it? Oh, here we go. Yeah, there's the railroad. So it goes through here, then it goes through that tunnel, and then it comes out here. Yeah, so it comes out here. This is where the railroad comes out, and I think there's like a loading chute, right somewhere around here. I think it's now an auger. But anyways, you can actually see Moab from the train looking down because the tracks are about 1,000 feet up from the town, so you can see it down there. It's a really cool, like, kind of a view. I wonder if I can show you all that on a road up there somewhere. And this isn't as high up as the railroad. The railroad's like 200 feet up. But you can look out and you can see Moab out there and the mountains out in the distance and everything. It's really like a really cool view.
Yeah, it's actually, honestly, it's really not my thing. Like, I might visit here to look at it or something, but I wouldn't want to live here, to be honest.
I wouldn't want to live there either. I'm not really a desert person. I like the beauty of it, but only in short amounts because I feel like that kind of like desert-like color and the monotony of it would really get to me after a while. So kind of cool to look at, but I would never really want to live in a place like that. But anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that well. And also, let's see. Matthew just started a poll that says, "Would you live somewhere as isolated as Moab, Utah?" And actually, let's say it's getting a little close. A decent amount of people are saying yes, and a decent amount are saying no.
Yeah, so about 55% said no, and about 45% said yes. And honestly, I'm with the 55%. I wouldn't live somewhere that isolated because it seems like, for one thing, it's like if you want to go to like a city or where there's a lot of people, you really can't. and you're stuck right there in that little town. So I just personally wouldn't want that. Like, I don't like living in really super crowded places, but I don't want to be out in the middle of nowhere either, because I've experienced what it feels like to be out in the middle of nowhere, and I really didn't care for it, which is really in the backwoods of Mississippi. Just visiting my grandmother, by the way. We didn't personally live there, but I got to experience it. I didn't really care for it. I was like, I don't like being out this far. It feels like you're totally on your own. I'm like, I don't like it. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, that was like some frontier stuff when we go out there. There's like no one around for miles. You know, it's like anything could happen. Like there was
Show them the place. Show them Shibuya, Mississippi. That's where we used to go, by the way. It's literally out in the middle of nowhere.
Shibuya. Let's see here. It's ought to be near this highway. And where is it?
It's below Meridian, I think.
Oh yeah, sorry, I was going the wrong way. Let's see. Wait, hang on. Is it further? Yeah, here it is. Here's Shibuya right there. So south of Quitman, north of Waynesboro. Now I remember it because Quitman was considered to be nicer than Waynesboro, and Waynesboro was dog water. But
terrible.
Yeah, Shibuya wasn't really that much better. Shibuya got like pretty rough. But let's see here. Let me drop y'all down in this town. We'll show y'all what it looks like. So this is Shibuya, Alabama. Well, Shibuya, Mississippi. Sorry, correction there. This is where we used to go to see our grandmom, but she didn't live in the town. She lived miles out of it. And in this area of Mississippi, there's almost nobody. And this town only has, I think, like less than 1,000 people living in it. It looked better back in the day. It's getting really bad off at this point. Like, there's no one around at all. It's almost a ghost town, really. Which is kind of sad because I remember back in the day, dude, no way. They tore down all the buildings around this guy's grill. Look at that. Like, all of these lots are now completely gone. Everything's demolished on them.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. It's been such a long time since I've been here. I don't even recall really what I'm looking at. It looks familiar in some way or another, but it's like I'm totally lost. That's what I'm looking at this point. I just know it's out in the middle of nowhere. Like, this thing was like just, out in the middle of like the boondocks.
Whoa, they're tearing everything down. So remember, Matthew, I'm not going to say the actual names, but there was someone's house further up the way up there. Remember the fellow, God bless his soul, passed away a little while ago. And then down that way, that's where you went to the cheese hoop place that burned down before we were even alive. Remember, we would always pass and they say there was giant hoops of cheese that they would sell in here. I
remember that too.
And then down this way was the gas station, which is like the only form of civilization in this town. And then down this way, that's where we would get to that artesian well and the playground that we would play on whenever we were here. So right over there, this little thing. That is actually, they got rid of the gazebo thing. What the hell are they doing in this town? This is an artesian well, though. It used to be a lot nicer looking than this. They built some new shed around it that looks like crap. But this is the artesian well, and it's actually groundwater from the local area. Tastes really good. It has like kind of like a slightly brownish color to it from the copper in the area. But it was actually, it was great water. We never died from it. We didn't get dysentery or cholera, so it was safe to drink. And it is up to like drinking water standards. So great stuff. But then across the way is this little playground. And our mom would bring us here to play on the playground whenever we were here, because most of the time when we came here, we were much younger. And then there used to be an abandoned train station here that was run by the Gulf Mobile in Ohio, and they would run the Rebel through here, and the Rebel, I think, would go down to New Orleans. But it would also go further north, and Shibuya was one of the stops. But once they stopped servicing Shibuya, which I think was like in the 60s, I think, then the town started going downhill. The train station burned to the ground, and there's nothing left of it anymore. I remember when we used to come here. Remember, Matthew, you used to be able to faintly see the foundation of the station back when we used to come here, but now that's all gone. It looks like they ripped it up.
Yeah, I remember that too. This is just like, this is like that. Honestly, I don't like this type of country living. Like, this is too country for me. And this is even more country than where we grew up. And we grew up in the backwoods of Alabama. So, this here was too much. Like, even when we go here from Alabama, this was like a shock. Even going from Alabama to here, and it still is a shock. Like, I can tell you, if you went here like right now, if you weren't familiar with it, you'd be like, "Huh, this is an interesting place." But it's not anywhere I'd want to live personally.
Let's see here. I'm trying to get my bearings here, man, because I'm not really.
It's Waynesboro Shibuya Road.
Waynesboro Shibuya Road. Let me take a gander.
It's right. It was right there in front of you. Yeah, there you go. You're right.
Oh yeah, here we go. So you go down this road. Yeah. Oh yeah, there's that little place with the tanks, and then there should be. I think that's where all the derelict oil stuff was further. No, it wasn't. I think that's it. think that's where the derelict oil stuff was.
There's a ton of oil wells down this way, by the way, like a ton of oil pumps and wells and things like that all up and down this way. That's the way a lot of people made their money through here.
Whoa, dude, it's completely grown over. Remember when we used to come through here? This lot was like mostly like that, like yellowish sand everywhere. And now it's all grown over.
Yes, honestly though, it looks generally the same though. It's been ages since I've been out here.
Yeah, really. And there's some old tanks back there. They used to not be like that reddish brown color. They used to be kind of like white with like rust on them. Now they're just completely consumed by the rust. But you go down here and you go right there. Should we show it like or no?
You can show, just don't name anything. Just show the area.
So, let's see. This is the place. Oh. Man,
my goodness.
Oh my
Damn,
God.
when was this picture taken? Dana sent a Google Maps car in last year in April. That's crazy.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah, this is it. This is it right here, actually.
Yeah,
this place has gone to hell.
Yeah, man. Jeez, look at that. So that's the little house that we would stay in when we saw our grandmother. And it was built by one of her family members, and they allowed her to live in it. Like, it was pretty much gifted to her. And we would come here, and there was a robbery that happened while we were here one time. Remember, Matthew, with the blower and all that. Like,
Yeah.
It was a wild thing. But look at that, man. The little gravel driveway completely gone, eaten up by grass and straw and everything. And the roof looked like hell. Look at that.
This is the craziest stuff happened whenever we're out here. Like the robbery happened, and then an individual who will not be named showed up and defended the whole situation, which was interesting. But that whole situation was wild to see all that going down.
And then there was like the whack UFO thing, like where everyone's like, "Oh my God!" Like I was the only person who didn't see it, but everyone there was like, "Oh my God, there was a freaking thing out there," and it wasn't a plane. And I was like, "Oh hell yeah!" I'll just imagine that. And then let's see, there was that. Let's see, what else happened out here, man? There was that time. Remember the homeless people who camped out on the other side of that lake that one time, and they had to be ran out by the sheriffs, like they were over here somewhere. And
I think so, yeah.
yeah. And then there's the little pump jack up here. I wonder if that thing's still running. You can't drop it down there. That's on private property. But there was a little pump jack up here for oil. And we would always go up there. Our mom would drive us up this little dirt road from that house, and we would look at the pump jack run. It was always cool. I always found it really interesting. And the little tanks to store the oil are back there. And every month or so, they'll come through and they'll pick up. It's like nothing. I think it produces like 136 barrels a month. It's not a lot. But that was a little.
It's crazy though, but like all up in this area right here, like all up and down this road, everybody's either family or they knew them or something. Mainly family. It's pretty much all up and down this road right here on this like old country road. It's wild how literally they would know every single person on the street, and usually related in some way or another. So just kind of fascinating.
Yeah. And remember when our grandmother was telling us that story? There was a house further down the way. I think it's still standing from what she said, but it was a family living there. And this is back in the day when the South was a very different place than what it is now. It's really come a long way. But back in the day, there was a family that was living there, and the dad was really abusive. He was like a drunk, and was violent when he was drunk. And he was drunk all the time. So he beat his wife, I think, according to how the story went. This was like way back, Matthew, in like the late 30s or something. And the kid said, "Don't hit my mom again," and he did. And I think he ended up murdering him. And she said that they, carted him off into Shibuya and executed him. I think it was like a week later or something like that. It was really like backwards ass times when you think about it with those kinds of stories. But still, Shibuya was an interesting place. Not really a place I'd want to go back to, but it was an interesting place nevertheless. Also, by the way, if y'all are wondering about that story, why I remember it because she said that in that house still you could see the blood stain on the wood floor where the son killed his dad because he hit his mom again. It really wild story there. But anyways,
that's not the only crazy thing that's happened out there. There's just all kinds of bad things that have happened back in the day because it's a different time. Just a ton of bad things that have happened out in the backwoods of Mississippi that I think most people would already know about.
Yeah, y'all know, honestly, Shibuya actually has a very dark history to it. Like if you look into it, there were some very wild things that happened there. Like